Avery, that'd be great. So we're now live. Welcome everyone to the Committee on Taxation. We're going to begin with committee introductions, and we will start with Senator Pouliot.
Good morning, State Senator Matt Pouliot, represent Senate District 15, the towns of Augusta, China, Oakland, Sydney, and Vassarboro.
All right, Senator Libby.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nate Libby. I represent all of the people of Lewiston in the Maine Senate.
Excellent. And Representative Bickford.
Good morning, Bruce Bickford. I represent House District 63, which is part of Auburn.
And Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. I'm Mickey Carmichael. I represent House District 137, Arthur Hancock, Washington, Penobscot County, including my hometown of Greenbush.
All right, and there's a few members that aren't with us. I think the next one is Representative Perry.
Good morning. I'm Joe Perry. I represent.
We missed you, Joe. You were sorry, you were muted.
Oh, for goodness sake. Good morning. I'm Joe Perry. I represent part of Bangor and part of Orono in the Maine House.
All right, and Representative Sachs.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Melanie Sachs. I'm honored to represent House District 48, which is Freeport and part of Pownell. Thank you.
And Representative Kryzak is with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Ted Kryzak. I serve as lead on the Taxation Committee, and I represent District 20, Acton, Lebanon, and part of Shapley.
All right, and I'm Senator Ben Chipman. I represent Senate District 27, which is part of the city of Portland. I also serve as Senate Chair of the committee. Our House Chair is Representative Terry, who will be joining us in a little bit. Also would like to introduce to everybody Avery Page, who's our committee clerk, and also with us is Julie Jones, our committee analyst. So we have public hearings today on 10 bills. So 5 of them have to do with veterans tax exemptions, more or less. There's 5 bills related to that, and the other 5 have to do with marijuana taxes. So I think when we typically have bills grouped in similar topic like this, we take them up as a group. So in that fashion today, we will take up the veterans bills first, starting with LD 1166, followed by LD 576, 647, 1181, and 897. And then we will go to the marijuana bills, starting with 1185, 1195, 740, 830, and 871. So we'll start with having the sponsors introduce the veterans bills first. So we'll hear from Representative Dodge to introduce to us 1166. And then following her, we will hear from Senator Jackson to introduce LD 576. And then after the sponsors introduce the bills, we'll hear from the public to speak for the bills, against the bills, or neither for nor against any or all 5 of the veterans bills, and we'll do the same thing on the marijuana bills. So we will begin with hearing from Representative Dodge to introduce to us LD 1166. Welcome, Representative Dodge.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, esteemed members of the Joint Standing Committee on Taxation. I am Representative Jan Dodge of House District 97, which includes Belfast, Northport, and Waldo. I am here to present LD 1166, an act to increase the property tax exemption for veterans by 50%. Maine has a long history of citizens heeding the call to military service. We have a high percentage of veterans in our population and a tradition of respect for those who chose to serve. From the GI Bill for veterans who attended Maine universities for post-military education to the present Hire a Vet initiative, we continue to support and honor our veterans. In 1967, a law was passed to assist veterans with their property taxes. Currently, in order to qualify, you must be a Maine citizen. You have to file an application by April 1st, be 62 years old, and demonstrate participation in specific military conflicts. If this criterion is met, a $6,000 exemption on one's property tax valuation should be provided. One constituent shared their experience with me and said, "Currently, my property tax exemption is $6,000. This was my first year to qualify, and wouldn't you know, the town decided to update valuations. So instead of less tax, I actually had to pay more. I asked a couple of the local veteran organizations in town about a bill, but no one had heard anything. I guess there is no such bill in the works. Can you help us?" Follow-up conversations revealed that as home values have risen, the benefit has indeed been negated. And as property values continue to rise in Maine, the existing benefit will further diminish. LD 1166 proposes to increase the exemption amount by 50% from $6,000 to $9,000. Subcategory C1, D2, and D3 are increased to $10,500. These are modest increases, and apparently it has been some time since an increase was passed. The Office of Policy and Legal Analysis assured me that Section 136 MRSA 653 was the focus of the bill. I have also listed Maine Revenue Service's Property Tax Division Bulletin Number 7, which was updated in December 2020, and details the definitions and rules that my local tax assessor directed me to consult. My testimony could end here, but I'd like to add that my dad, a World War II veteran and staff sergeant in an Army Air Corps Mobile Army Surgical Hospital unit, would be proud I submitted this bill. I would like this committee to know that I would be open to amendments that would lower the qualifying age from 62 to 60, that would increase the percentage of the proposed exemption, and would correct the elimination of some merchant mariners who served in times of recognized conflicts that occurred in the past. Further, I would urge the committee to consider anyone who has served in the United States military and has been honorably discharged for inclusion in some way under LD 1166. This would be a tangible reminder to them of our gratitude. Thank you. I look forward to the work session and will try to answer any questions you may have.
Excellent. Thank you, Representative Dodge. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Yes, go ahead, Representative Krajicek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative. Representative, do you realize that we're not reimbursing the total amount for homestead? Are we reimbursing for the total amount of the veterans deduction now? Do you know?
I believe that we are not. I believe it's a 50% reimbursement to the municipalities.
So wouldn't it make sense more if we went after reimbursing the total homestead and the total veterans benefit, which would help the veterans and all the other people with homestead deductions with their tax bill more than increasing the amount that we don't reimburse? Because the town just has to spread that amount throughout the taxpayers of the town if we're not reimbursing 100%. So if we were to reimburse the veterans benefit at 100% and the homestead benefit at 100%, that would give much more benefit to the veteran than what you're proposing to add an additional $3,000 that's only being paid back at $1,500.
I believe you are correct. I support both initiatives, and I thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I did want to say, if I can continue with that answer, I believe when I spoke with the assessor for Belfast, he said there were only about 35 or 40 veterans for whom this would have an effect.
Yeah.
Excellent. Then we have a question from Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative, for bringing this forward. I think in my research, I think that the towns are reimbursed for 90%.
No.
That's what I read. No?
Perhaps that has changed. Was that part of the December 2020 update in the
It
rules?
was, I don't know, I looked the law up and that's what I got out of, I could be wrong.
No, as could
but-
I.
We could find out for the work session about that.
Yep.
You're talking about the veterans, the reimbursement for veterans, Representative Carmichael?
Yeah, reimbursement to the town for the
The town.
veterans, yes.
For the veterans, yep. Because it's different for homestead, I think, than it is for veterans, but we can find out for the work session about that.
Yep. I echo the sentiment that, it should be at it'd be favorable to be at 100%.
Okay. Any additional questions from members of the committee for Representative Dodge? Seeing none, thank you, Representative Dodge, for being here to get us started this morning and introducing this bill. We will now hear from Senator Jackson to introduce to us LD 576, and then following him, we'll have Senator Keim introduce LD 647. Welcome, Senator Jackson.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, members of the Joint Standing Committee on Taxation. My name is Troy Jackson. I represent the people of Northern Aroostook County and Senate District 1. I'm here today to present LD 576, an act to increase property tax relief for veterans. Here in Maine, in fact, we have one of the highest numbers of veterans per capita. According to a recent report by the National Conference of State Legislatures, we are one of 6 states where veterans account for 10% of our population. At the same time, property taxes in our state have been out of control. In my district, residents in Caribou have seen some of the highest property tax burdens in Maine. This is making it difficult for all people, whether they are veterans or otherwise, to live comfortably in their homes with some degrees of peace of mind. That is why easing the property tax burden has been a top priority for myself and many of my colleagues. In the 128th legislature, we increased the homestead exemption by 33%, bringing the total exemption up to $20,000. In the last legislature, we built on that relief further by increasing the exemption to $25,000. We also increased the property tax fairness credit significantly by expanding eligibility and providing another 13,000 Mainers with relief. This bill recognizes the real problem, the property tax burden, and seeks to give some modest relief to those who served our country. Current law allows for a $6,000 property tax exemption for those who served in the federally recognized war periods. This bill extends that exemption to a very modest $10,000. The language of the proposal will look very familiar to those of you who are members of the committee during the 129th legislature. As written, it is based on the amendment that received bipartisan support of the committee last session. And I'm hopeful that it will gain the committee's support again this year. Too often our servicemen and women struggle to return to civilian life. This bill could provide a little degree of comfort by bringing a cut to their property tax bill. And as far as the $10,000 amount, like I said, I based that on the bill from last year. Committee obviously, if there's an opportunity to go higher, be very supportive. But like I said, I thought this was at least a little bit of an increase to give some relief to people that definitely deserve it. So thank you for your time, and I'll definitely try and take any questions.
Great. Thank you, Senator Jackson. Are there any questions from members of the committee for Senator Jackson? Representative Carmichael, your hand is up. Is that from before, or do you have a question now?
I'm sorry, that's from before.
Okay. Looks like we don't have any questions, Senator Jackson, but
Sounds good.
With us. We look forward to working with you on the bill.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Thanks for what you're doing. Appreciate it.
Welcome. So we'll now hear from Senator Keim to introduce to us LD 647. And then following Senator Keim, we'll hear from Representative Wadsworth to introduce to us LD 1181. Welcome, Senator Keim.
Thank you. And good morning, everyone. Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, members of the Committee on Taxation. I am Senator Keim, and I'm proud to represent Senate District 18, which includes Northern Oxford County and 2 communities in Androscoggin. I'm here today to present LD 647, an act to expand eligibility for the Veterans Property Tax Exemption. Similar to what you just heard, only one small piece of it. This bill allows persons who served in the armed forces of the United States during the period from February 1st, 1955 to February 27th, 1961, to qualify for the Veterans Property Tax Exemption based on dates of service. This is an expansion from current law, which now only allows veterans who served in a recognized period of war to qualify. Though the time period outlined is not a federally recognized period of war, this bill would only benefit a small amount of veterans, but the members of our armed services who served during this period still agreed to place their lives in danger for our country. And this is recognizing that. The idea for this legislation was brought to me by a constituent, Vern Maxfield, the town manager of Woodstock. And I submitted this same bill last session. If any of you were on the committee, you'll recognize that. However, last session, after my bill was presented, the language of this and the idea was incorporated into an omnibus veterans bill. And I would respectfully request the committee consider this legislation separately. The veterans, this bill would help represent a diminishing number, and the funding required for this bill is significantly smaller than it will be if it's lumped together with all the other bills that are seeking to help veterans. So simply stated, this bill has a better chance on the appropriation table as a standalone bill. I respectfully request your careful consideration of this legislation and vote ought to pass, honoring our veterans. Thank you so much for hearing me today.
Excellent. Thank you, Senator Khan. We have a question from Representative Kreiser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator. This period, if I'm remembering my history, appears to represent the Korean War veterans. Am I correct?
You would have me there on that information. I would have to check that myself.
Okay, it seems that's the time that the Korean, and I'm just surprised that they're not already included because that was a war. So now beyond 61, do we not allow this exemption to the Vietnam veterans? Does it go beyond 1961?
As far as I'm aware, this is the period of time that wasn't federally recognized, and so there's sort of a carve out for just this time period.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Senator.
Representative Bickford has a question.
Yeah, I just want to help clarify. 55 to 61 was the period between the Korean War and the Vietnam War. And we do recognize all the Vietnam veterans as of a bill that we had, I believe, in the 127th to 128th.
Okay. Any additional questions? Any additional questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Senator Khan, for being here to present LD 647.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you. Good to see you. So we'll now hear from Representative Wadsworth to introduce to us LD 1181, and then following him, we'll hear from Representative Warren to introduce to us LD 897. Is Representative Wadsworth with us?
I'm not seeing him on.
Okay. Is Representative Warren with us? Maybe we could have her introduce LD 897, and in the meantime, Avery, maybe you could try to reach Representative Wadsworth somehow and let him know that we would like to hear from him following Representative Warren. If it's possible to track him down. Welcome, Representative Warren. Is Representative Warren with us to introduce to us LD 897? Representative Warren does not seem to be with us. She's on the screen, but she's not responding. Not sure what to do. I don't know if you could try to call her, Avery. Do you have a phone number for her? I don't have her in my phone.
I don't have any contact information for her. I can email her.
Huh. Okay, well, I guess we'll just be at ease for a moment while we try to track down Representative Warren and Representative Wadsworth. We'd like to have them introduce their two bills, and then we can hear testimony from the public on all five bills at the same time.
Okay, I just got an email that she's at a press conference right now.
Okay.
She's working on making her way in.
Okay. So we don't have anybody actually signed up to speak on those two bills. So Representative Warren, you're with us.
I am. Hello.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
We're waiting for you. So yeah, if you'd like to introduce to us LD 897, we're ready for you to do that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you. I won't take your time. Good morning, and thank you, Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, and the distinguished members of the Committee on Taxation. In the Maine State Constitution, there's the provision around housing and saying that we want a just value to our property tax rates. And so when I was campaigning in a socially distant way in the past year, I talked a lot with folks in my community about how here in Scarborough, there's a lot of development and growth, and all those things are very good and great, and yet it creates a confusion and a disconnect between older residents and maybe new Mainers and young families and folks that want to come in and be part of our community here. And so when I think about sort of a just value, I have been thinking and speaking a lot with mostly older veterans in my community, and thinking about, is there some way that we can make it so these property tax rates acknowledge things like fixed income, and just trying to think about all the ways that they have given to our community and been part of our community for so long. Things around, I guess changes over time that folks can't, both that their properties are valued in a different way and wanting to make sure that they stay valued as well. So I come to you in a position actually of trying to clarify that the amendment that I ultimately came to and am proposing to you is not specific to veterans. It's actually a broader adjustment to the to senior citizens in Maine, more broadly speaking. And so the proposed amendment that I'm coming to you with has to do with a bill that was proposed in the 129th by Representative Ken Ackley, but ultimately was a late submission and wasn't able to be part of that session. But it has to do with allowing municipalities to set below market interest rates for senior citizen property tax deferral programs. The consideration in part having to do with the fact that this phrase of fair market rent is a rate is has to do with an evaluation from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, has to do with the rates between, I guess, a 40% rate of all valuations in a given I guess, locality or municipality. But if there's a lot of growth or development that's been happening, that can put senior citizens in a position to be judged as an average of something that may not be appropriate for them. So that can, especially if they're on fixed income, if an area has seen rapid development and investment, the value of the property has outpaced their wage, or if they're on something like permanent disability or otherwise no longer able to work. So I appreciate your consideration. I look forward to your questions, and this was definitely a long process with those, my local American Legion posts primarily, but I think that this was the most appropriate way to address the needs of my community in a way that could be reflective of other communities as well, to support those that I intended to, but it definitely is not specifically targeted towards veterans. So I just wanted to make sure to acknowledge that and give that broader context. I hope that's appropriate. And thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
So thank you, Representative Warren. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Representative Sachs.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Representative Warren. Welcome to the Tax Committee. So I did review that last evening, the amendment that, thank you, Julie, for sending it on to us. So is this and my dogs have just decided to go after a squirrel, apparently. Sorry for that. Is it just that one highlighted piece about municipalities able to lower interest rates for the lien? So that's the entirety of the legislative change? Okay, thank you.
And if I could expound on that, if you have follow-up questions, please let me know. That this was something that was still in line with the Maine State Constitution, but would just not put additional penalty. And to be as well, there's this is something that is done in different ways already in different municipalities, but not there. It's probably really hard to enforce. And so I thought that having this clarity was a precise way of understanding what's already happening in different ways that different municipalities are trying to protect their senior citizens and reflect the contributions that our senior citizens have made to our different communities in Maine, and acknowledging the unintended consequences. But I think clarifying this law in this way would allow other municipalities to do this as well in a way that could be consistent, again, with the state constitution, and then maybe perhaps if you'd consider it as state law as well. So I hope that clarifies.
It did. Thanks so much.
Any additional questions from members of the committee? Representative Kryzak, you have your hand up, but that maybe, is that from before, or do you have a question?
I'm sorry, that's from before.
Okay. So seeing no further questions, thank you, Representative Warren, for introducing to us LD 897. Great to see you. We will now hear from Representative Wadsworth for LD 1181. If you've been any success reaching him, Avery, or we're not sure.
The minority office is trying to track him down, but I haven't heard anything.
All right, so let's not hold up the committee. We have people that want to speak. There's nobody actually signed up to speak on that bill. So we can, I guess, move forward with testimony from those that want to speak in favor of any or all of these bills. We will start with Destiny Poole. And then following Destiny Poole, we will hear from Kate Dufour.
I'm not seeing Destiny on, so I'm going to go ahead and promote Kate Dufour.
Okay. So we'll hear from Kate Dufour, and then if we don't have Destiny sign on, we will then hear from Vern Maxfield if he's with us from Norway. So welcome, Ms. Dufour.
Good morning, all. Should I just start now?
Yep, go ahead.
Cool. All right, Senator Chipman and members of the Taxation Committee. My name is Kate Dufour, and I'm here on behalf of the Maine Municipal Association to provide support for LD 576. And we're supporting this because we believe it's necessary to ensure that all veterans who served during a conflict are treated equally under Maine's property tax laws. And we think that both 576 and Senator Kimes' bill addresses that concern. Our assessors deal with veterans on a regular basis, and it's sometimes very difficult for them to explain to somebody that, I'm sorry, you don't qualify for this exemption because of when you served. And so they're looking at this as an opportunity to level the playing field among veterans who served not necessarily in a federally recognized war, but a conflict, a time when the country was in conflict. And we do appreciate that LD 576 does include 100% reimbursement for the additional, the increase in the exemption. And, we recognize that the legislature could change its mind on that exemption or that reimbursement at any time. But when it comes to veterans, it is a risk that our members are willing to take. And I also submitted testimony in opposition to LD 897 because it was a concept draft. And to the extent that the committee is going to explore this approach, it would be nice if members of the public had an opportunity to opine on a legislation that's actually developed. It's very hard to prepare testimony on a concept draft. So to the extent that the committee is interested in pursuing that approach, we would appreciate an opportunity to submit written comments on our thoughts on that particular bill. So I thank you for your time and consideration, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Dufour. Is there any questions to members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being with us and speaking on this issue. We'll now hear from Vern Maxfield, and if Representative Dodge seems to still be with us, if you have a way to track down Destiny Poole, she's from Rockland, maybe you know who she is, just let her know that we'd like to hear from her before we move to testimony in opposition to these bills.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead, Representative Krasik.
could I ask Mr. Ford a question?
Oh, yeah, sure, go ahead. I didn't know we had any questions. Go ahead.
Mr. Ford, do you know how much we're reimbursing the municipalities for the veterans benefit now?
It depends when the exemption was adopted. So the Constitution requires the state to reimburse municipalities for 50% of an exemption that was provided after April 1st of 1978. So to the extent that the exemption has been expanded since that date, the state constitution requires the legislature to pay 50% of that reimbursement, of that exemption. And to Representative Carmichael's point about the 90% reimbursement, if you look at the veteran estate of veteran exemption laws, that 90%, I believe, is a threshold in current law that says to the extent that the exemptions provided to veterans are equal to or more than 3% of the total property tax levy, then the state comes in. So it's a bit of a circuit breaker. A threshold must be reached, and then there's a requirement from the legislature to reimburse communities because of that burden that's placed on all other property taxpayers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Ford.
Thank you.
We'll now hear from Vern Maxfield. And then if Destiny Poole does join us, we'll hear from her. And if not, we will then move to those who want to speak in opposition to any of these bills, which I don't see anybody signed up to speak in opposition. So welcome, Mr. Maxfield.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, and the members of the Taxation Committee. My name is Vern Maxfield, and I have the honor of serving as the town manager of Woodstock, Maine now for almost 33 years. During those years, I've met and talked and worked with a number of men and women from that period that we're talking about who served in the military but don't qualify for the tax exemption because of the way the law is written. I'm here this morning to speak in support of Senator Kimes' bill number LD 647, an act to expand eligibility for the veterans property tax exemption. Over the years, I've been asked many times why the veterans who have served during the period from February 1st, 1955 to February 27th, 1961 did not qualify for the veterans property tax exemption that is available to other veterans. The answer, of course, is that they have been exempted from this benefit as it was not a period of declared war. It was between the Korean and the Vietnam, as I think Senator Bickford said. In hearing of the commitment and service of these individuals who have also served in the armed forces of the United States, some also in very dangerous situations, I believe that they too should have the same property tax exemption. Each one who has served in the armed forces of the United States of America have, from our country's beginning, been a major factor in protecting the freedom that we enjoy. I would encourage you to give this legislative document your support and approval. I believe it would be a very positive and beneficial step in supporting these veterans who have protected us, and I don't believe the numbers of those folks that would qualify is a great number at this point, as it's been so many years. But I do thank you for your kind attention in listening to my comments, and I would be willing to take any questions you might have that I could answer.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Maxfield. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being with us. Appreciate your testimony. It looks like we have someone else who's also signed up to speak. who's not on our list, but his name is Steven San Pedro, who's here to testify in favor of LD 1166. I don't know if you can promote him, Avery. He appears to be in the waiting room. Steven San Pedro.
Got it.
So thank you for being with us, Mr. Waxfield. Appreciate you being here today.
My pleasure.
We'll now hear from Steven San Pedro, who will speak in support.
I'm sorry, I don't know why I didn't get on. Are you hearing me?
Yeah, we can hear you and we can see you now. Welcome.
Okay, I'm sorry. I submitted my testimony and requested to speak, and I don't know why I wasn't on there, but that's behind us. Good afternoon, Senator Chipman and Representative Terry and honorable members of the Taxation Committee. My name is Steven San Pedro, and I represent the Department of Maine Veterans of Foreign Wars as their legislative chairman. First of all, just so you have some history on me, I served 20 years of active duty, earning the rank of first sergeant, and I retired in 2008. Becoming a member or getting more involved with my local VFW, serving as a commander of the post, the district, and then the state commander in 2016-17. I don't say that to toot my horn. I say that to show you that I have the interest of military service members, veterans, and their families in the best of their interest in ours as an organization. On behalf of the VFW and its auxiliary members, we're here to speak in favor of LD 1166, an act to increase tax exemptions for veterans by 50%. First, I would like to thank Representative Janice Dodge for her efforts in addressing this much needed change. The current law, Title 36, Section 653, is so outdated and provides little to no relief to these veterans. These veterans that are 62 years old or older and are 100% disabled, service connected, receive $6,000 exemption. Most are retired, getting Social Security, or can't work because of their disability. When this law was passed in some time, I'm not sure exactly when, the earliest I can see is 1967. This was a lot of money. With today's prices of homes and taxes paid, this provides very little relief. For example, a property valued at $125,000, the veteran would receive a 4.8% property tax relief. One at $250,000 would receive 2.4% tax relief. These changes, or this change would change it to 7.2% and 3.6% respectively. As I said, the VFW supports this bill. However, we feel that it's not strong enough. We would support a committee's amendment to expand the age limit downward to 60 years old, to set the exemption to a set rate of 10%, and to eliminate the merchant marine exclusion from qualifying conflicts from many years ago. These changes would make us competitive with other states. We constantly say we want veterans to come live in Maine. Well, let's give them a reason to. Some other states give 50 to 100% to veterans in these same situations. I submitted a list of each state and what they give their veterans so that you can see what other states are doing for them. In closing, once again, we strongly support this. Whatever direction you go, we feel that this will help veterans in their golden years and those that have disabilities. And I stand by for your questions.
Great. Thank you, Mr. San Pedro. Is there any questions from members of the committee? Go ahead, Representative Matlock.
Thank you. I feel the need to jump in here. Thank you, Mr. San Pedro, for being here. My family is full of merchant mariners. I understand that I was not here for the very beginning of this hearing, regrettably, Representative Dodge, but I understand that the only time that merchant mariners are included in the federal compensation for their service during their service during World War II. Is that what you're suggesting be included or not included?
Any time that they served, they were recognized during that time frame. However, there are other times that they served that aren't recognized. Just helping with supplies.
Yes. Specifically, my husband was aboard ships that were reflagged Kuwaiti tankers in the 90s. And that was not a good time to be in that area of the world aboard a tanker. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any additional questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being with us, Mr. San Pedro. Appreciate your testimony today.
Thank you.
So that concludes all of those who signed up to speak in favor of any of these 5 bills. We don't have anybody actually signed up to speak in opposition, and we don't have anybody signed up to speak neither for nor against. We're still waiting on Representative Wadsworth to introduce LD 1181, which is the last of the 5 veterans bills.
He should be here in a second. He was just with the governor and myself. I'm sure he'll be in just a sec.
Yeah. I mean, we can wait for him, or we can have someone else introduce the bill, or I'm not sure. I mean, we're doing the 5 veterans bills first, and we've got through all the testimony, and the other 4 sponsors have already spoke to introduce those bills. And then we're going to go to the 5 marijuana bills. So I don't know, Representative Terry, if you think we should wait a few minutes, or if we should have someone else introduce it, or if we should just go into the marijuana bills.
Why don't we wait just a second or two?
And we've called on him a few times, and Avery's called his office, and it just has not been successful. So I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, my thought is maybe one of the, Senator Pouliot, Representative Kryzak, someone wants to look up the bill and just introduce it on his behalf, so we can then schedule it for a work session, and maybe we could hear from him at the work session if he's available.
That sounds like a great idea. Representative Kryzak, is that okay with you?
Well, I'm thinking if he just came from the same, I'm sorry, my phone just dropped. I'm thinking if he came from the same meeting that you did, that he should be on any minute. And I would prefer, not having any previous experience with this bill, I would prefer that Representative Wadsworth present it. I will make a quick call and find out what's going on.
Yeah, and if you can't get him to come, Representative Kryzak, maybe just ask him if it's okay. If, typically in this situation, a member of the committee will just sort of read the summary of the bill, and just so it can be formally introduced without necessarily answering questions and stuff like that. But if you can reach him, that'd be great. We'll just kind of be at ease here for a minute, waiting for Representative Kryzak to see if he's able to track down Representative Wadsworth. Just so you know, Representative Terry, and everyone else, I need to step out in a few minutes, about 10 minutes or so. I've got to go introduce the bill to another committee, and Representative Terry will continue things here. But just so you know, once we hear from Representative Wadsworth, we'll then move to the 5 marijuana bills, starting with LD 1185, 1195, 740, 830, and 871. So we'll have the sponsors all introduce those bills one by one, and then have the public speak for one or all of the bills, followed by those in opposition, and then those neither for nor against one or all of the bills. And we discussed earlier maybe allowing people to speak for 5 minutes, since they'll be speaking to up to 5 bills at once, since there's not as many people signed up as we normally have. And so instead of 3 minutes, we'd allow them 5 minutes so they can have more time to talk about the different proposals.
Excellent. That sounds great. Thank you for the update. I appreciate it.
Do you have the list of signups from Avery?
I do, yes.
Okay. So you have that, so you know who's signed up and everything. Great.
Yep. No problem. Did we lose Representative Kryzak? Oh, we must have.
Well, I think he signed off to call Representative Wadsworth, so he should be back with us here soon. But
It's hard to have just one device. I'm usually working on 3 at the same time. There he is.
no, Representative Kryzak, will be back with us.
Yeah, I put a call in, and we should have him momentarily.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Ted.
Yep, you're welcome. How was the governor today?
Oh, it was really great. It's so cool to have those breakfasts because you get to hear what's happening in other committees, especially not being in the State House. You know, I don't know what's happening anywhere. I feel like I'm so focused on our work here. So it's really great to hear what's happening all over the place. Did you guys know that there was wind coming into the ocean real close? Just kidding. I knew.
Do
about
tell,
I
do
knew
tell.
about that one.
So was it a Zoom meeting or an actual?
Yeah. I think during the course of the year, the governor tries to get together bipartisan groups of representatives and senators so we can all hear about what each other's work is and tell her you know, what our priorities are and listen to what her priorities are. So it's really very good. It's good to,
Oh, that's great.
yeah, good to get a good idea. I told her that really she should only be paying attention to taxes, but other people had other ideas. It was great. Awesome.
Come on, Nate.
Yeah, I think you might have been off when we talked about this a little bit, Representative Krajicek, but we were saying that sometimes when this has happened in the past, we'd have another member of the committees look up the bill and kind of read the title and the summary of the bill just so it can be formally introduced, and then allowing the sponsor some time at the work session to speak if they would like to do that as another alternative to waiting, you know, if he's not available. But I'll kind of defer to you if what you feel comfortable with on that. But
Okay, what's the bill number? I'll look it up.
it's LD 1181. So you would just introduce it on his behalf, read the title, the summary. You know, we're not expecting you to answer questions since we know it's not your bill, but that would just sort of formally introduce it so we can schedule it for a work session, and then we can let Representative Wadsworth know if he wants to come provide information to us. We could give him some time at the work session since he was tied up this morning and not able to be here.
Okay. Oops.
Ben, what's the number? 871?
It's 1181.
Oh, 1181. Sorry. Thank you. There's no testimony's been submitted to it.
Yeah, there's no testimony, but I mean, it'd be good just to get it introduced, and you know, then we can move to the marijuana bills, and then you know, we can't really schedule a work session on the bill till someone, you know, it's introduced some way formally, you know. We can't hold a work session on it, I guess you could say. So
Okay, I've got it.
okay. So Representative Krajicek, if you'd like to, we'll hear from you on LD 1181 on behalf of Representative Wadsworth.
Okay, Chairman Tipping, Chairman Terry, distinguished members of the Taxation Committee. I'm here to represent Bill number LD 1181, an act to reduce property taxes on the primary residence of veterans who are 100% disabled due to service-connected disabilities. And this bill is a concept draft, so there's nothing. This bill proposes to reduce property taxes on the primary residence of veterans who are 100% disabled due to service-connected disabilities. And that's all that's written on the bill so far.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you for introducing that on behalf of Representative Wadsworth. If anybody has a question, I guess we could allow that, but I don't see any hands up, so we'll appreciate you doing that. And we didn't have anybody signed up to speak on the bill for or against, or neither for nor against. So that bill has now been formally introduced, and so not having anybody else signed up to speak on any of these bills, we'll now close the public hearings on LD 1166, LD 576, LD 647, LD 1181, and LD 897. And we'll now move to the public hearings on LD 1185, LD 1195, LD 740, LD 830, and LD 871, beginning with the sponsors of these 5 bills to introduce the bills, and then we'll hear testimony for, against, and either for or against any or all 5 of these bills. So we'll start by hearing from Representative Perry to introduce to us LD 1185, and following him, we'll hear from Representative Roberts to introduce LD 1195. Welcome, Representative Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My phone just dinged about 30 seconds ago with a request for 740 to go first because of time constraints. Would that be all right?
Yeah, that's fine. That's my sheet got cut off here, so I don't have the sponsor's name on that, but
I think it's Ann.
I'm sorry?
Is it Representative Matlack? Bill, I don't know who the text came from. It said from Ann.
Oh, I'm sorry, Representative O'Connell. So it's Representative O'Connell is the sponsor for LD 740. Is Representative O'Connell with us?
He is. I can move him over.
So if we can hear from him to introduce to us LD 740, and then following him, we'll hear from you, Representative Perry, on LD 1185. Okay, great. Welcome, Representative O'Connell.
Okay, all right. Am I there now?
Yep, you're with us. Welcome. We're ready to hear from you to introduce to us LD 740.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you getting me in. Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, and esteemed members of the Joint Standing Committee on Taxation. My name is Kevin O'Connell. I represent House District 128, which is most of the city of Brewer. Thank you for the opportunity to present LD 740, an act to provide municipalities a percentage of the revenue generated from the taxes imposed on the sale of recreational marijuana in those municipalities. I bring this bill before you today for the municipalities and property taxpayers across our state. This committee has held public hearings and work sessions on several bills regarding revenue sharing and direct relief to our property taxpayers. And I understand that additional bills will be heard in the coming weeks. This bill, like those just referenced, seeks to alleviate the burden on Maine's property taxpayers. This bill would require 25% of the revenue from the sales tax and excise tax on adult use marijuana to be placed into a fund. Municipalities where marijuana establishments are located will receive a portion of the fund in ratio of the revenue generated from marijuana establishments within that municipality. With the state continuing to underfund revenue sharing, it puts a great burden on our municipal governments as they look to craft their budgets. They're faced with few choices to make up the difference. They can decrease services, dip into fund balances if they have them, or they can increase mill rates and raise property taxes. It also puts a strain on our school boards as they work on school budgets and weigh cutting programs to make ends meet. By allowing municipalities to a share of the state's revenue generated by these marijuana establishments, they can use that revenue to continue funding essential services such as public works, public safety, or school funding without once again requiring property taxpayers to pay more. I also want to emphasize that this bill would only apply to those municipalities which have a marijuana establishment within their borders. In a year where our country has faced a pandemic, our citizens were out of work, and our economy entered into a recession, I ask this committee to take this small step to alleviate the property tax burden on our neighbors. Thank you for your consideration of this proposal and for your attention. I am happy to answer any questions you may have for me.
Thank you so much, Representative O'Connell. Does anyone have any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. You're welcome to stay if you'd like and listen to everybody else's, but we won't hold you to it. It looks like you might be working.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Kevin. Next up is LD 1185 from our own Representative Perry.
Well, good morning.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and esteemed members of the committee. It's my pleasure to be here to introduce 3 bills here this morning. I have forwarded written testimony on 1185. I've got testimony for 830 and 871 coming. I had a great deal of confusion and when I started reading the bills this morning. I thought I had one today, but they're pretty straightforward. The 5 bills today are all quite similar, with 1185 being the one that's most substantial policy. So we'll get into that. Basically, what we'd like to do is create a 12% off the top of revenue of sales tax and excise tax revenue, and put it into a fund at the state level to be shared back with the municipalities. I served on the Bangor City Council when we were implementing marijuana policy, and we actually had kind of an interesting situation in Bangor. The planning board voted in favor of it, allowing recreational use marijuana in the city, which meant it took a supermajority of the council if we were going to override that. And so allowing recreational use marijuana in Bangor passed with the minority vote of the city council. We did not override the planning board. And the main concern was the added expense. The license fees really only allowed us to recoup the cost of licensing. There's nothing left over for all the additional costs with involved. And I'm telling you, it was staggering the amount of work that went in from code, from police, city management, the council, the planning office. It really has taken a lot of time and labor. I mean, we had outside legal counsel. We spent a lot of money making what I think is model policy. And then incidentally, after we licensed our very first store in Bangor, we ran into a problem. We had to go back and do more work on the setbacks and such. So the communities that have chosen to sell recreational marijuana in their communities, the voters statewide approved it. Not everyone, it's an opt-in. You don't have to do it. But for the ones of us who have and have picked up the substantial additional costs and burdens to the community, it only seems fair that a portion of that should be given back to our municipalities. And so there's a lot to consider in this bill, and I know come work session, you're all going to want to report out the best version of it we can. So I look forward to the input from the entire committee to get a bill that we can all get behind. So that's what I've got on LD 1185.
Awesome. Thank you, Representative Perry. And am I wrong in thinking that this is your testimony for 1185, 830, and 871? Do you want to?
No, I got a little more.
More for those?
So,
okay.
yeah,
So
I'm sorry.
Okay. So we'll start with questions. First from Representative Bickford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Perry, how many additional people have been hired in Bangor to specifically take care of the recreational marijuana business?
So Representative, you broke up in that question. I didn't hear it. Can you repeat it?
Yes. How many additional people have been hired in Bangor, whether it be police or code enforcement, or how many people have been hired specifically to take care of the recreational marijuana?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure that anyone specifically has been hired, but I can tell you, I referred person after person after person who wanted to be in the marijuana business to our legal department, to our code department. I know we spent thousands and thousands of dollars on outside legal counsel while we developed this. So, I mean, they may not have hired anyone, but I can tell you a lot of time is being devoted to it. And I'm sure that pushes costs somewhere else and potentially new staff somewhere else, not specifically for marijuana, but because of marijuana.
Okay, and the only reason I'm asking is I was on that marijuana committee,
Mhm.
And the reason that we did not put a lot back to municipalities is because we didn't know, and we wanted to make sure that any monies that went back to municipalities were specifically targeted at costs they incurred, whether it be hiring, more police, more public safety, more code enforcement. And the reason we said that too was we wanted to make sure that we weren't rewarding
Mhm.
municipalities for having it. We were going to only help them if necessary.
Yeah.
So
you
that's
broke up-
why that's why we were going to wait until it ran for a year to see how expenses were.
Yeah, and I don't know how to put a finger on that exactly, but I do know, it is taking a lot of city time. And quite frankly, I was one of the ones who voted in favor of having recreational marijuana here in Bangor, and not because I thought it was going to be a big payday for the city, and I could tell from the way the law was written at the time, it was likely going to be a lot of expense, but the voters statewide voted for it. And quite frankly, I thought a lot of the arguments in opposition to it were arguments about the problems we currently had before recreational marijuana. And I was a true believer that legalizing it and regulating it would clean up those problems. And from what I can see, to a very large extent already, it is taking care of a lot of the problems by getting this out of off the streets and into some of the neatest stores you've ever seen. And I'm sure at this point you would agree, we ought to give a little to the municipalities.
Yeah, so it's possible it's actually saving you money then. Is that correct?
No, I don't think it's saving the community money. I think it's saving community members headaches, okay, of things going on in their neighborhoods. Now it's going on in the Bangor Mall area. So I think it's a quality of life issue is better in the city of Bangor, but I don't think we're saving any money. I think we have and will have ongoing costs.
Great.
Thank you.
Just as your community will too, I imagine.
I'm sure.
Representative Kryzak, you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think. Yeah. Representative Perry, you say you have one adult use store open now. Are the fees that you're getting for that license, is that enough to pay for the costs that you have for letting that be established?
So I think we have more than one now. We've got one, two, let me think, one, two, I think we've got at least two and some more coming. I've visited one to check it out, and I can tell you, it's like walking into an Apple store. It's really, it's some of the finest retail space in the city. I can't answer that question. I don't know what the licensing fees are, but what I know is when we were working on the implementation, we were told from our legal counsel that we spent tens of thousands of dollars on advising us that these licensing fees were intended only to cover the cost of licensing. Okay, not any of the ongoing costs of of housing these new businesses in the city. And quite frankly, we maybe the ongoing costs aren't going to be as substantial as we feared, but I'll tell you, our investment to get here and to honor the will of the people has been significant. And why should everything go to the state? I mean, we all believe in local control. We know the property tax burden is crushing people, especially in our service centers.
I think we may have lost Joe for a second.
Sharing it around a little bit.
Oh, there we go. Good.
Sharing a little bit of that revenue would certainly be important to municipalities.
Could I have a follow-up?
Of course.
I don't know if you know or not. Do you know if you were making, if the city was getting any income from medical use marijuana?
Can you repeat that question?
Was the city getting any income from medical use marijuana before the recreational use was voted in?
Yeah,
I know
so
that
we don't have, I'm
Go ahead.
sorry, I'm just having a hard time with my connection. We don't have any of the 8 originally licensed medical marijuana dispensaries in Bangor. I don't believe that's sales taxable. I don't believe the municipalities are getting anything from that. Then we've got hundreds, I'm sure, of caregivers here in Bangor. And for the longest time, after the creation of caregivers, there was almost no regulation allowed at all on the city level. Now, I know the state has changed some of that over the years, and I'm not sure if there's a local license fee or not. I'd have to report back to you at work session, but I can tell you it's not, whatever it is, isn't keeping down anyone's property taxes.
Yeah, no, I know there is no local fee for it, but I didn't know if there was any kind of any way that you were getting income because of people were in there, because I don't have to get a city permit.
Yeah, I think they were pretty hands off on the medical side locally.
Thank you.
Representative Sachs.
Madam Chair, and good morning, Representative Perry, colleague. So just a few questions, please. How would this differ from, say, a community like mine, Freeport, who has to staff up police, public safety, and fire to accommodate a swell of what used to be 3 million visitors during the year, which we're grateful for? But there's no local option tax, there's no reimbursement for that, yet it's a service that we provide to support our economic development activities. How is marijuana different than something like that?
Well, I agree with you. I recognize the challenges your community faces. It happens, in many communities across the state who have the influx during the summer, like Freeport or Old Orchard or Bar Harbor. But then we also have the service center communities like Portland, Lewiston, Auburn, Augusta, Bangor, which we really provide all the services for our entire region. Anyone has, I met with the city manager yesterday. Every day, Bangor police are finding other local police jurisdictions from around us, including state police, dropping off people who are drug addicted or homeless or need services of some kind into Bangor every day. The state opened a homeless shelter in Bangor, took over an entire hotel, and now the costs on the city of Bangor are staggering. And so we all our communities face these different challenges. So, I believe there's a need for more local options, be it a portion of the sales tax or options for your community as well as mine. But this bill focuses solely on this one brand new industry that, back in the old days, the real estate transfer tax was 90% county, 10% state, and over the years it has flipped. So, it seems like over time, a lot of money ends up at the state level, and with a brand new industry and the state needing partners on the municipal level to make this work, it seems like there ought to be a share left in the local community.
And if I could follow up, Madam Chair, with one more question. Thank you, Representative Perry. And so again, I look to see this as an opt-in, which Freeport chose to defer because of, not to get political, but the ambiguity from the state and the policies. It's taken a long time to figure some of these out. And so they're just now looking at it. But as it's an opt-in, was the cost factor something that a community should have known and looked at if they were going to embark on this? And so now is looking to recoup some of that on the back end by carving out, which is again a policy that this.
I don't necessarily think that. I know yeah, I'm sorry. I started to answer, you broke up, and I thought your question was done, and I got most of it. I will argue that your community will be helped significantly by what the city of Bangor did. But if every community had waited, what the will of the voters never would have occurred. And I suspect if you decide to move forward, one, you'll be helped greatly by the tens of thousands of dollars or maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars we spent in Bangor when you implement it. But I also suspect you may find that you wished the state shared a bit of the revenue with your community because, one, it seems like the right thing to do. And secondly, we offer the waterfront concerts here in Bangor. The state of Maine collects all the sales tax revenue, and the city picks up all the expenses. There's example after example that your community and mine are picking up the tabs for activity that helps the state of Maine. So take all the costs and everything out of it that might be incurred. It still seems like good policy.
Thank you.
Senator Chipman, sorry.
Thanks. Yeah, there was a misunderstanding on the time of when I needed to be in this other committee, so I'm back for a few minutes, but I just wanted to get a question in while we're talking about this, because this issue came up last session in this committee. And so Representative Perry, I think part of the issue with the marijuana legalization and wanting to get rid of the black market was to have a robust recreational market across the state. And so when this came up last session, we talked about the issue of revenue and wanting as many municipalities as possible to participate. So it could be a robust market everywhere across the state, and the state as a whole would be bringing in more revenue as a result of that. And we'd really be kind of squashing the black market and making this a legitimate recreational industry. So do you think that by passing this bill, if we were to pass this bill or one of the other bills that you have that you're bringing forward today, that would encourage more communities to participate and have a more robust market and therefore bring in more revenue to the state as well?
Well, very well could. I mean, that's the flip side of it. I'm glad you brought that up, Senator. You know, if there was nothing in it for the communities except expense, you know, it may never get off the ground, and none of this money would have been coming into the state. So and quite frankly, if that does entice other communities to get involved, it may end up putting more competition for the businesses that we have and that we're going to have in Bangor. But it still feels like the right thing to do for the communities that are choosing to do this. And I think overall, even after this cut, I mean, my bill says 12%. I personally think it ought to be 20%. But whatever we end up on, supporting, you know, that I think in the end will likely mean additional revenue for the state and fewer black market problems statewide.
Yeah, because I mean, that was one of the big policy issue that I think we, considered with this last time was, if there's nothing in it for the cities and towns, they're going to say, well, why bother with the headache? And some of them aren't going to want to allow it. Whereas if there is money in it for them, they would allow it. And so if there's multiple towns that don't allow it, you could have, no recreational stores anywhere in interior Cumberland County, for instance. So somebody in Bridgeton drives all the way to Portland to go to a recreational store because none of the other cities or towns are feeling like they want to do this because they're not getting anything out of it for revenue. And then the choice for the consumer is, do they buy from the black market from the guy down the road in Bridgeton? Do they drive, 35 miles or 40 miles to Portland? So it keeps the black market thriving. And I think the whole point of this law in the first place was to get rid of the black market. So it's that, to me, that's the policy issue in terms of this, is do we want as many towns and cities as possible? And we heard testimony last session about this, where there were some towns that said they weren't sure they were going to allow it. I think Kittery was one of them, and a few others that said they didn't know if it made sense.
Well, and this might be totally unrelated, but you bring up the black market. And I had a conversation with someone last week. I think it was one of our colleagues in the House who's a counselor, social worker, and I think it was her who said that there's fentanyl showing up in everything, even marijuana on the street. So I think anything we can do to keep fentanyl out of our society. And so if this does entice other communities to consider it, then I think all the better, because so I tell you, that store I went into, I think there's some other changes we need to make to this law. You have to wait outside. You have to be carded outside before you even step foot in the building. I was, as a visitor, I had to sign in, wear a badge out in the back, security everywhere, tracking on everything that came in and out of that place. So I think this is the solution to a problem we've had for a long time. And if this ends up encouraging more communities to consider it, then I'd say all the better, both for the communities and for the revenue of the state.
Great. Thank you.
Any more questions for Representative Perry, who will also be at our work session? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next up will be Representative Roberts for, sorry, go ahead, Joe, sorry.
Was I going to do 871 and 830 as well? Because those are different bills, or are they coming after Roberts?
If you don't mind, we're going to have Representative Roberts, because she's got to go testify elsewhere and chair a committee at the same time.
Good. I'd love to see her.
I appreciate that. Representative Roberts, you are up with LD 1195. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Taxation. I am Representative Tiffany Roberts, and I represent House District 6, which is comprised of the majority of North and South Berwick. I am here today to present LD 1195, an act to increase funding to qualifying municipalities by sharing adult use marijuana sales and excise tax revenue. LD 1195 allows municipalities to offset costs associated with Maine's growing adult use marijuana industry by allocating 5% of gross sales and excise tax revenue generated by adult use marijuana to the municipalities where the revenue was generated. Additionally, this bill makes a reduction to the amount deposited in the adult use marijuana public health and safety fund. In the development of Maine's adult use marijuana industry, the state has asked municipalities to help balance the newly sanctioned use of this commodity. However, municipalities are not yet seeing a return on their investment. And according to the Maine Municipal Association, Maine is the only state out of 11 states that has legalized non-medical marijuana, yet does not allow municipal governments to recover any expenses from their regulation of the adult use marijuana industry. A similar bill, LD 335, which I believe Senator Chipman referenced, was brought before the Taxation Committee during the 129th legislature and was passed out of committee, but held up by its fiscal note. It's important to note that like LD 335, LD 1195 does not create a new tax, but instead proposes a share of tax proceeds that will help generate increased state revenue. Overall, this bill removes the budgeting uncertainty for municipalities and encourages partnerships with local businesses. I thank you very much for your time and consideration. I'm sure there'll be many experts that can answer more technical questions, but I'm happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability and provide you with any additional information you may need for an upcoming work session.
Thank you very much, Representative Roberts. Looks like Representative Kryzak has a question for you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Roberts, it's good to see you again.
You too.
As you know, we border, our districts border, and I was wondering, are your towns opting in for the recreational marijuana?
So we have, North Berwick has opted out indefinitely. So had South Berwick, but we were just, we have two citizen initiative petitions going to the ballot this summer for adult use. So the town council came to me, you know, I knew this had already come before your committee, but you know, there's kind of a feeling of, okay, we're opting out until someone gets enough signatures and it goes on the ballot, and then we're not opted out, and there's no real, you know, kickback to the municipalities for a decision that, you know, the local government did not make. I know that my percentage shoots a little low, but I was kind of going on the revenue sharing goal type 5% is where I'm at there. And the offset on the health and safety fund was to take some of the heat off of taking it away from the state as well. But yeah, so I've got Representative Kryzak, I've got a little of both. So
and so do I. Lebanon has opted in, and it's costing them a fortune because they wrote an ordinance, and then there's been all these court cases from Portland that have made their ordinance illegal. So now they have to go back again, and they spend all these legal fees. Acton has opted out completely, but now we're getting citizen initiatives to get on the ballot to bring it in too. So it's the same thing. But it's definitely about the cost of the municipalities to start this up and to come up with an ordinance in order to make it work right for the town. But I mean, they got helicopters flying in from out of state for people looking at land in Lebanon so that they can open up adult use.
Absolutely. And I'm keenly aware of the cost and the manpower. You know, we have a small household where my son is on the town council and my partner's on the planning board. So I'm keenly aware of the impact that this has in the communities.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you. It looks like Representative Bickford has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning.
Good morning.
Just point of clarification and then a question. I don't believe municipalities have an opportunity to opt out. They have to decide to opt in. So I just want to clarify that there's no opt-out provision. It's an opt-in provision. The question I have is, do you have liquor stores in your municipality?
We do not. We have,
None
like Cumberland Farms that sells liquor, but we don't,
Okay, so they sell, yeah, so they sell liquor. What do you get from the state for that? Do you get a kickback?
I'm not sure. I'm trying to think. One that I'm thinking of is over the border. Yeah, there's one in each. I'm not entirely sure. I can get back to you with that.
Well, I know the answer. It's no. We went through that in our marijuana committee, and we tried to model the recreational marijuana similar to the liquor. You know, back after Prohibition, when all municipalities had to opt in to sell spirits, they got nothing back from the state, but they knew it was right for the community, so they did it. And so I just want you to comment on that for me.
Yeah, I can tell you that any sales or costs around, I mean, the two places that I can think of that would sell alcohol in my entire district are like one of those little mini Cumberland Farms, as opposed to, you know, what's emerging as a large industry that's requiring regulation and, you know, policing, security, yeah, all kinds of things like that. Where these little, I mean, I'm talking less than 1,000 square foot stores. And even a smaller portion of that is selling spirits. So it's really, that's not the nature of our towns here, I guess.
So I guess my question is, you don't think beer, alcohol, and wine require any policing, but marijuana does?
To be completely honest with you, Representative, I am a 10-year recovering alcoholic, so I have no idea the volume of alcohol that's sold in my town.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Representative Perry. You're still on mute. You're on mute, Joe. There you go.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Someone had suggested we do like a quarter jar like we used to do for phones and committees for every time we say you're on mute.
Right. So I'm going to find a way to turn this into a question for you, but I can tell you, if in your community, if you decide to start licensing marijuana, it sounds easy with recreational sales, but you have to have different regulations for producers, growers, labs, extractors, producers, food. I mean, the level of code you get into for food, for just everything, it will boggle your mind. So would you agree that having a small cut would certainly help offset that?
I would agree, because as I've said, my partner is on the planning board, so I live and breathe this all the time, more than I would care to.
Very smooth, Representative Perry. Very smooth.
Much different than liquor. There's no local license.
Representative Sachs.
I just felt that had to be acknowledged, the elegance of that.
Very nice.
On the record.
Good work. Anybody have any other questions for Representative Roberts? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is LD 830, again with our very own Joe Perry. And 871, are we going to do those together or separately?
Yeah, I think I can introduce those together. They're both, one's kind of just, I think, common sense housekeeping. It's brought forward both by well, a department bill that I'm sponsoring and the industry is certainly in favor of this. It's just good sense, and it has to do with the way it might actually seem like these two bills are in conflict, but I think, you know, maybe we can, I think through the process of working these 5 bills, we might come up with some solutions that certainly hopefully take care of this. So one of them is just one of the new things that we're learning in the marijuana industry is on the excise tax, there's a huge difference between freshly cut wet marijuana and dried marijuana. So if we were to, and through these processing companies that have started, one of the things that they're finding a need for is to quick freeze fresh marijuana to process later. And so if we were to apply the excise tax to the weight of wet marijuana when it leaves the producer, that's the taxation point, is when it leaves the producer, that tax would be about 5 times higher, 4 or 5 times higher than it should be, because that tax should be applied to dried marijuana. So it's just tying the hands of producers who want to bring it in wet and freeze it for production later. But there's a second bill. The second bill is I think a really interesting thing for us to consider. And it has to do with just getting rid of the excise tax completely and putting the entire tax burden onto sales tax. It's estimated or predicted that 70% of recreational sales will be to tourists, okay? And when the first recreational stores opened, there was a bottleneck where people, growers had harvests that had to be harvested. The recreational stores did not have any or very little inventory, and there was a bottleneck trying to get excise tax licenses for these growers so they could legally sell to the recreational market. I found myself helping some individual growers get their excise tax license, and excise tax is really a pain to deal with, if they're, and especially for these growers. If there was a way we could get rid of the excise tax completely, put the entire burden onto the sales tax, it would make it a lot easier for the growers. I think it'd be neater for the state. I think we could raise the same amount of money. And with 70% of it coming from out of state, I don't know, just putting onto the sales tax seems like a better way to go. It just makes it easier for the people in the industry, and it raises the same money. So those are the two bills there.
Okay, thank you very much. I have one question on each of them, if that's okay. One
Sure.
is for the work session, can you bring some information from other states on how they're taxing excise versus sales? And I mean, it doesn't have to, I'm not looking for anything specific. I'm looking for general themes of what other states, especially ones that have had this law in place longer than we have. If you could bring that with you, that would be great. Maybe somebody from MRS might have that information too. And then the other part is well, you know what, never mind. I'll pass on that.
Well, I can tell you the really good news is we have someone from the department here who's going to testify, and I'm sure they will have answers and can bring you anything you want, and I won't have to get involved.
Sounds good. Representative Kryzak, you're up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Perry, I guess I don't understand how excise comes into this. At what stage is the excise tax charged, and who is it charged to?
For the state, and you'll have people who you'll have people coming after me who I'm sure can give you very specific information. I got the numbers here somewhere if I could find them, but there's two levels of tax. An excise tax sets, you have to be licensed to collect and remit to the state, and that's the grower, I believe, who has to, I'm sure of it, who has to get that license, and it goes by weight, and they have to remit it straight to the state. If we could just take them out of this completely, up the tax rate, so it's all handled. And quite frankly, we had a change in tobacco tax last session. And as a retailer who sells tobacco products, when it's an excise tax level, I'm laying out that money up front to inventory that product because of where that tax is collected. So as a retailer, I'm paying for that up front. It's also business friendly for the retailers because if it's not an excise tax, their cost of goods is less, their cost of inventory is less, and they collect the sales tax at the point of sale and then remit it after they've collected it. And walking in and visiting this marijuana store, I mean, I don't know how many tens of thousands of dollars of inventory there is there, but I think that would also go a long ways to helping the small independent retailers because it's really cutting their inventory cost by, I think, 30%. And then they just collect it and remit it after they've got the money in their hands. Much easier for retailers in a lot of ways.
So the store owners are paying the excise based on what they have in the store, and then the sales tax is charged as it goes out the door?
So someone can correct me if I'm wrong later, but the grower would say the grower grows $10 worth of product and they have to remit the excise tax at that point. That'd be, say, another $3. So that's built into the wholesale cost when the retailer eventually buys it. If that tax is not built in, then the retailer's inventory costs are likely going to be about 30% less to inventory their store. But they will, if the sales tax rate goes up to make up the difference, they remit that money to the state after they've collected it. So it really, well, I'll tell you, when the state of Maine went from $1 to $2 a pack on cigarettes about 15 years ago, it put basically, I've been in the store business 30 years, and 30 years ago when I started, I had a choice of half a dozen or more wholesalers, and they were all trying to cut each other's prices to gain business. Today we have one, and they dictate all the terms and prices, and you play by their rules. And the biggest part of that was the $2, going from $1 to $2 on excise tax. The cost for that, those wholesalers to pay up front for that excise tax and have that millions of dollars of inventory, and then that flowed down to the stores that the stores had thousands of dollars of new inventory. If that money was all collected on the sales tax, it all comes, from the consumer at the end. It comes from the consumer in the end anyhow. It's just the timing of when it's collected. A lot easier on the wholesale market, a whole lot easier on the retail market. So there's a lot of good reasons, other than the sheer beauty of the simplicity and taking people out of all that regulation, including Maine Revenue. That's a bunch of licenses they don't have to issue, and the retailers all have their sales tax resale license, regardless of what the tax rate is.
Thank you.
Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Perry. The excise tax, now that's paid by the growers. So do growers in the state of Maine sell to other states, to retailers in other states? No, it's not interstate.
Yeah, I don't believe that there's any interstate marijuana at all. Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. I thought probably because it's still not legal nationally, so the interstate commerce would be a problem there, but, and I just wondered if that's.
I'm sorry, I'm trying not to talk over you, but I'm just so damn glitchy here. I can't tell when someone's done, but yeah, that would be a real concern of potential loss if it was interstate, but I don't believe that's an issue.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, if that's why they had the excise tax, rather, to capture tax from the growers. Yeah. Thank you.
Representative Bickford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just want to say, Joe, I appreciate your comments on that, and you are 100% correct. The grower, when it goes from the grower to the processor, the excise tax is collected then and remitted to the state based on weight. And it's no different than tobacco. It's no different than even spirits, and wine, which all have excise taxes. They're built into the wholesale cost. Absolutely. And I want to thank you for that information.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, seeing no other.
I've always wanted to do something good for you, Representative Bickford.
I appreciate it. And I'm not cranky today, Joe.
All right.
All right, so we'll start hearing testimony in favor of all 5 of these bills. I'll ask members of the attendee list if they are speaking about one in particular or one specific, if they could just let us know. But we will start our conversation with Kate Dufour from Maine Municipal, followed by Michael Saxel, both in favor of LD 1185, that is. Avery, would you mind letting those folks in? Thank you. All right. Good morning, Ms. Dufour. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Excellent.
Representative Terry and members of the Taxation Committee. My name is Kate Dufour, and I'm here on behalf of the Maine Municipal Association to provide support for LD 740, 1185, and 1195. And much of my testimony was delivered by Representative Perry, which takes a little bit of the pressure off of me. But we're basically communities across the state who have opted in, have spent an awful lot of money getting ready to invite this new industry within their municipal boundaries. I've said this before, I serve on the Hollowell City Council, and it was a lot of work. Endless meetings, the attorneys always with us, because we wanted to make sure we were adopting ordinances that were going to stand up to the test of time and challenges, as well as to treat everybody within the community fairly and take into consideration some of the differences of opinion that we had with respect to bringing this new industry into our communities. So we feel that by sharing some of those revenues, you recognize the efforts that municipalities are doing. The second point I want to make is that this is economic development for the state. And it's economic development that communities are investing in, yet not getting any reimbursement for that input. So we think it's fair that we retain a little bit of this revenue that we're helping the state generate, because without us, it's highly unlikely the state would be generating as much revenue for itself. So we're just asking for a little share. There's quite a variety of options before us. It's almost like a buffet. The 25 would be nice, but we think the 12% that's being offered as a share is basically where we were when the legislature adjourned last session. We had negotiated on LD 335. We were at 12%, and that recognized both municipal efforts, local efforts, as well as our contributions to the state's success and its program. So I thank you for your time and consideration and answer any questions you might have.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Ford. We have a question from Representative Sachs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Ford, for being here. I'll ask the same question of you, particularly as you and I keep beating this 5% general revenue sharing drum constantly here in this committee. What makes this activity, and I know the initial outlay, but much like many other economic development efforts, particularly in my community of Freeport, and I know others, what makes this unique in Maine municipals as a representation of municipalities across the state? It may be time intensive now, but what makes this worthy, so to speak, of an ongoing carve out?
I think I wouldn't say it's a carve out per se. I think, just because we've done things one way in the past doesn't mean we can't modernize and move forward. And I would suggest to you that this investment, this is a partnership. We are helping the state raise new revenues. These are revenues that were not available before, a couple of years ago. So it's partnership. It's recognizing that, yeah, maybe the upfront costs are intense and then they kind of slow down after the fact, but we helped create that system. And we are just asking for a share. Without us, without local level investment, which there will be some costs associated over time. It's not just the direct cost, but it's the fact that we are partnering and we are helping the state succeed. And we just want a percentage of that. Again, if not for our local level efforts, the state wouldn't be generating as much.
Could we not argue that about any economic development initiative?
Yeah, we could, and we'd be happy to take a cut of any economic development. I mean, we're not gonna argue there, but this recognizes that there are some communities in the state that were willing to take that first step. Okay. And I'll put it to you this way. I think when you look at communities, there are communities who are gung-ho, they really wanted to do it. They put in all the work to get to where we are today. I think there are communities in the state that will never come along. This is not something, and I think the group in the middle is watching. And to the extent that this is successful and that there is some return to the community, I think you'll see more of that middle ground coming on board.
Thanks so much.
Any further questions from members of the committee? I've got one question. So, Ms. DeFore, would you say that, in follow-up to the previous question from Representative Sachs, that what makes this different than any other industry or market out there is that there's a a very strong, robust black market, or has been up to this point with marijuana, unlike alcohol, unlike any other industry really. There's been this very robust black market with marijuana that we're trying to overpower with the new recreational market and shut down, so that marijuana can be legitimate, can be safe, can be taken out of the hands of children, can be sold safely, tested, not laced with other drugs and things like Representative Terry talked about earlier. And so to do that, we need as many towns, if not every town across the state, opting in, so that we can overpower that black market, shut it down, bring more money into the state for revenue. And the way that we entice cities and towns to do that is to give them a small share of the revenue. I mean, is that something you think is probably the crux of this whole issue?
And Senator Chipman, I would suggest, I agree. I mean, I agree with you 100%.
Okay. Representative Bickford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Ms. Dufour.
Good morning.
Do you believe that by having recreational marijuana, aren't we actually saving communities money, especially in policing and public safety, by maybe turning down a lot of the unwanted black market marijuana use or sale?
I don't know that we have a huge role in that type of enforcement. I mean, unless you have a special unit within your municipal police ranks, we usually rely on the state to do that type of enforcement of, basically illegal drug enforcement. So I'm not sure that there's a significant savings with respect to enforcement efforts.
So you're saying municipalities don't enforce illegal drug use?
To the extent
Or
that
do
to the extent that a community has the capacity to do so, they do. But I think they largely partner with the state, who has far more resources with respect to illegal drug enforcement.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Fuller, for being with us. I think we'll now hear, if it's okay with everyone, from Ms. Trundy, Anya Trundy. I believe she's got to be somewhere else soon, so if we could have her come in to speak in favor.
Sorry, actually, I believe Mike Saxel is next, and then Anya. Ben, sorry about
I'm happy always to defer to Ms. Trundy. I have been for years.
Plus, we had some kind of a scheduling issue, but yeah, we can hear from you, Mr. Saxel, if you'd like to go next to speak in favor of any or all of these bills.
Sure. My name is Michael Saxel. I run an operation called Main Street Solutions, which is a government relations and campaign arm of a law firm called Verrill. And I am outside counsel for a wonderful group of marijuana entrepreneurs called the Maine Cannabis Industry Association. These folks work in both the adult use and the medical marketplace. They're medium-sized folks. They are much smaller than dispensaries, but they aren't your typical caregivers either. And they believe in a transparent, regulated marketplace in marijuana that will drive out the illicit market. And they are okay with taxes, and they are okay with regulations, and they are okay with track and trace, because they want to make sure that their products are getting in the hands of responsible adult users. I'm here today to certainly to support LD 1185, but as my predecessor, Ms. Dufour, eloquently said, you have a wonderful buffet and they are all connected. So I'm also in support of LD 830 and LD 871. I have not studied LD 1195, but I bet I would like that if I read it more closely as well. Let me just quickly say that on 1185, I heard Ms. Sachs express some concerns about why is marijuana special? Well, one of the things that's special about marijuana and the need for revenue sharing is there is no revenue sharing with marijuana. With Freeport and LL Bean, there is revenue sharing, and a portion of that money comes back to support the community. And that is terrific, and as it should be. And were we to be talking about the local option tax, we could think about that as well. But I do not think that we should penalize communities who have entered into the adult use marijuana marketplace by not allowing those revenues from those sales to be shared with those communities. Some of those communities didn't want to have adult use marijuana retail in their communities, but an ordinance was passed independently. You know, we've run campaigns around the state of Maine, whether it's Newry or other places, and those communities have been asked to do something by their people. Well, in order to do those things, it does cost money. And I think we have to recognize that those communities, whether it's Bangor or Auburn or Lewiston, have to figure out a way to offset those costs. And it does not seem fair to socialize those costs amongst the property tax. I think that is unfair to people on fixed incomes and low income people. And we think that providing some tool to offset those costs is just a matter of plain fairness. Municipalities do not need to have adult use marijuana. They can opt out. Those communities do need to opt in. So it is different, a little bit different anyway. On LDs 830 and 871, the wet weight of marijuana should not be taxed at the same rate as the dry weight of marijuana. I think it was an oversight. I worked very closely for 2.5 years with Representative Bickford and super committed folks like Representative Peirce and Senator Cates. And that was one we didn't see. We didn't think about it at the time. It was a complete oversight in the marijuana committee. Wet weight marijuana is not more valuable than dry weight marijuana. It should not be, it is just heavier. It's a 5 to 6 times heavier than dry weight marijuana, and it just shouldn't be taxed at the same level. It should be taxed to the value of the product. But if you pass the elimination of the excise tax and go to a straight sales tax, you won't need to worry about that in our buffet of legislation. So let me move quickly to the other piece of legislation. The idea of moving from a blended excise tax and sales tax, and Representative Bickford is totally correct. Liquor and tobacco have been taxed that way in the past at both those levels. Initially was to make sure that there was enough money for the startup of the Office of Marijuana Policy and efficient regulation from the state, because we didn't know how the recreational market was going to work and whether there'd be enough sales. But now that we are transitioning to a marketplace where there will be robust sales, the value of moving from excise tax, sales tax blend is a few things. Number one, it's simpler. It's a lot easier for people who are doing the production and the sales to have a one spot place to do that taxation. Number two, there's no pyramiding of taxes, so you don't create harm to small growers and smaller people in the marketplace who might not have access to the revenues like a big multinational giant company like Curaleaf, let's say, who prints money from marijuana from other jurisdictions. And so you want to make sure small people survive, then moving from the excise tax to sales tax is a good idea. If you want a small Maine entrepreneur to be healthy, that's a good idea. The third reason is the people who are going to be the major purchasers of adult use marijuana in Maine will be people who are not from Maine. We've estimated somewhere around 70% of the consumers in adult use marijuana will be our tourists. And so those folks being able to export the base of that value and not tax Maine businesses and smaller entrepreneurs seems like a really good idea. And we've been trying to figure out a way to do that since I served in the legislature a gazillion years ago. And then the final thing is that if you have the opportunity to add value to the product and capture that value in your tax system, that makes a lot of sense. So where the excise tax is attached is at the very rudiment at the beginning of the cultivation process. Once you've been through cultivation and then manufacturing and then packaging and retail, then you have a marijuana flower that is converted into perhaps a beverage, a baked good, a vaping pen or whatever, and you will gain more revenue for the state And it will be easier once you pass revenue sharing for you to distribute it back to those municipalities who are hosting those wonderful retail establishments. I would be delighted to answer any questions, and I don't want to get, and I would also be willing to defer and hang out and let Ms. Trundy go next if you prefer.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Sachs. So we have a question from Representative Sachs, followed by Representative Bickford.
Representative Bickford was first, Mr. Chair.
Well, you would put your hand up and then put it down a couple of times, so I thought you put yours up first initially, but we'll defer to Representative Bickford. Go ahead, Representative Bickford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Mr. Sachs. Long time no see.
Good to see you, my friend. I'm glad to hear you. I heard the beginning notes about your walking. I'm glad to hear you're up and about.
Oh, thanks. Hey, so the question I have is, you made reference to LL Bean and Freeport and how Freeport does get a cut of LL Bean's sales because of the revenue sharing.
Right.
So why would it be different with retail marijuana sales? And I think you alluded to it at the end.
Yes, because the legislature initially decided they would, as you said, I think earlier, decided that they would not have any revenue sharing at all as part of the original compromise to pass adult use marijuana. And so there is zero revenue sharing right now for marijuana sales. And so it's just different. And if it's also different because I think almost every community, I've never heard of a community in Maine that has banned retail sales. So every community that participates in retail sales gets a portion of that money back in the form of revenue sharing. Now, whether revenue sharing had worked really well during part of Maine's history, I think it hasn't worked always that well. But that's a different problem than we're having today. I'm just saying that if you're a host community and you are providing for these services, that we've learned from experience that it costs money to host a retail marijuana establishment. And so revenue sharing is an appropriate tool to offset some of that cost, not all of it.
But don't we already have revenue sharing in the same form as LL Bean does, as we do with LL Bean? Absolutely. All sales tax goes to the state, correct? And then it gets dispersed back to the communities.
There's no revenue sharing for host communities that is unique.
No, not unique or separate. But what I'm saying is the same as if I go to TJ Maxx and pay 5% on what I buy, 5.5%, then the community is going to get back a portion of that, whether it's 3.5, 3.75, or 5%.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry.
Basic revenue sharing, correct?
So Poland Spring will get part of your revenue sharing for hosting a retail marijuana store, but you in Auburn have a number of retail marijuana establishments and cultivation facilities and manufacturing facilities, a lot of them, because you guys were early actors, and you have not offset those costs by having some form of revenue sharing in Auburn. As a result, your other property tax payers in Auburn are subsidizing the cost of entering into retail marijuana.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We have a question now from Representative Sachs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the reason I had asked Representative Bickford to go forward, because my question is quite similar. I think that Mr. Saxel, that this does not, sales tax from existing marijuana retail shops do not go into special fund, that they are counted as sales tax and are distributed as part of normal revenue sharing, correct?
Yep.
The difference is you're advocating for, again, a specific percentage to return to the host community, but currently they are treated just like any other retail sales going into the general revenue sharing pool. Is that correct?
More or less. My argument is that being a host community for a marijuana is not the same as being a host community for retail sales.
Understood,
of other
but I
products.
just wanted to clarify that because I think it was misleading. So thank you.
I certainly did not mean to be misleading, Representative. It's never been my my intention, and I apologize if it was confusing to you.
Any additional questions from members today? We'll now hear from Anya Trunde, followed by Mark Barnett.
Remaining 4 bills. I'll start with the testimony on 871. This bill ensures that marijuana flower and trim cultivated in the state's adult use marijuana program are appropriately taxed at the rates determined by the Marijuana Legalization Implementation Committee in 2018 by providing a conversion formula for determining the taxable weight of wet marijuana and trim that is transferred from a cultivation facility licensee to another adult use licensee. At the time, the legislature enacted the excise and sales tax rate on marijuana flower and marijuana products would be approximately 20%. Marijuana flower and trim would be dried or cured for a period of time prior to the transfer from at the time that they transfer it to a cultivation facility licensee. Okay, so that's that one. Moving on to LD 830. We are testifying neither for nor against this bill. So as you may recall, when the Marijuana Legalization Implementation Committee set the tax rates for the adult use recreational marijuana market in Maine, it applied both excise and sales tax rates to the adult use marijuana and marijuana products to reduce the volatility of marijuana tax revenues coming into the state and to deter diversion of regulated marijuana into the unregulated market. There have definitely been some very valid arguments made this morning about the merits of moving to a straight sales tax. And so what I'm going to provide is more a history of what the thinking was at the time. So to achieve an overall tax rate of 20% on marijuana and marijuana products, the legislature implemented an excise tax rate of $335 per pound of flower and $94 per pound of trim, and a sales tax rate of 10% on marijuana and marijuana products sold to consumers. These rates were determined to be appropriate at the time for 2 reasons. The first is that the excise tax was intended to provide a more consistent, stable, and predictable revenue stream for the state, as it's not susceptible to fluctuation in the prices of marijuana goods as the market matures. This is because the marijuana excise tax is based on the actual weight of raw marijuana transferred and is not a wholesale or retail price. The second reason was the excise tax was intended to apply some value to raw marijuana early in the cultivation and manufacturing process to discourage diversion of the raw plant material into the unregulated market. It was expected that once a licensee had paid excise taxes on the plant material, that plant material would have a higher valuation in the regulated system than it would in the unregulated market. So all that being said, all adult use marijuana is tracked in a comprehensive inventory tracking system to prevent diversion. So the excise tax is an additional security measure against diversion. The adult use marijuana program began issuing active licenses to marijuana establishments last fall, and it's still in its infancy, with retail sales to consumers beginning in October of last fall. At this time, our department only has tax data from approximately 2 quarters upon which to forecast the impact of the changes of the proposed in this bill. But we can say anecdotally that we have already begun to see the retail price of marijuana and marijuana products decline as more marijuana use retail stores have come online. And we can provide additional information and data regarding retail sales and expected sales and excise tax revenues and the like at the work session as requested. And then finally, moving on to the revenue sharing bills. It's important to note that the revenue stream from this industry has not yet reached full maturity, and municipalities may not receive as much revenue as they anticipate from these proposals until the industry has achieved additional growth. DAPS has some technical comments regarding these bills. First, LD 740 and 1185 require the state tax assessor to determine the actual monthly cost incurred in administering this additional transfer, which would be difficult to do on a monthly basis. MRS recommends determining a fixed monthly amount to be retained by the assessor instead. Additionally, MRS's preliminary administrative cost is estimated to be $5,000 to update statistical reports in order to determine the percentage to be distributed back to each municipality. And this cost would be the same for each individual bill. Finally, DAFS recommends that any revenues distributed to host communities follow the distribution of 12% to those revenues to the Adult Use Marijuana Public Health and Safety Fund. Implementing the cascade in this manner will reduce the overall fiscal impact of all of these bills. And then DAFS doesn't have a recommendation regarding the appropriate percentage of these funds to be distributed to host municipalities, but we expect that you have and will hear from host municipalities regarding the costs incurred at the local level. We will note that municipalities have the existing ability to establish local licensing fees as a means to recoup their expenses related to hosting adult use marijuana establishments. Those vary pretty wildly. You know, I looked up Bangor's while I was waiting, and it looks like their licensing fees are about $500 for a retail store, if I'm remembering correctly. But on the other hand, on the high end, Portland is $10,000 for an adult use marijuana retail store. And the last thing that I will note, because this has previously been discussed, but revenue sharing does include the sales tax on adult use marijuana. So it doesn't include the excise tax because revenue sharing is based on sales and income tax, but it does include those sales tax revenues currently. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Ms. Trunde. It seemed like there was a little bit of confusion about the sales tax and revenue sharing, and appreciate you clarifying that. Do you have any questions from members of the committee? I think you had your hand up, Representative Terry. Do you have a question or no longer?
I did, and I'm gonna hold off on that for the work session. Thank you.
Okay. So seeing no questions from members of the committee, appreciate you being with us and speaking to those bills, Ms. Trunde. We'll now hear from Mark Barnett to speak in support, and following him, we'll hear from Joseph Ferris. Welcome, Mr. Barnett.
Hey, sorry, trying to figure out my hardware setup here. So do I have 5 minutes? Just a quick question, or do I have 3?
Yeah, well, I think we talked about earlier allowing folks 5 minutes because they're speaking to any or all 5 bills at the same time.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. Good morning to the chairs and distinguished members of the Taxation Committee. My name is Mark Barnett. I'm a resident of Auburn, a registered caregiver operating a caregiver retail store in Portland, and I'm an executive chair of the Maine Craft Cannabis Association. Taxation is a loaded subject area, especially during a time of economic hardship for both the people of Maine, but also its governments, both municipal and local. Marijuana taxation is even more loaded subject. But I think importantly for today, I want to talk a little bit about the big picture when we're looking at these various interacting tax issues in the adult use industry. Maine's adult use industry faces a number of challenges in launching, and obviously launching during a pandemic was one of those. However, there is a very high cost of doing business built into the regulation, and a much higher tax rate, which are making it less competitive with, yes, the black market, which I would argue it's not really a competitor with, but we could come back to that. But Maine's excellent medical market, and then also the Massachusetts cannabis market, where a huge portion of Maine's marijuana, tourists would be coming from for the adult use market. When you add that to very slow processing of applications, weak interest in cultivators or ability from cultivators to participate, and lack of facilities, there's a lot of few options for stores to carry as a result. And I want to make this point. It doesn't help that certain attorneys have been supplying municipalities with oftentimes inaccurate information to scare them away from opting in, or almost worse, to opt in a way that privileges only the most wealthy participants. And with these high fees that you are hearing some about, even with those, what we're seeing is that munis still can't really access much financial benefit besides uplift from property taxes, and then of course employment in their town, which is a meaningful item. To Representative Bickford's point about there are still some economic benefits flowing to these towns. So I guess this first portion is a little bit more on 1185 and 1195. And my apologies. I signed up to support 1195. I'm not 100% conversant with the differences between the two, but I do believe that 1195 and 1185, if that's the better choice, ought to pass, because many of these towns are actually going to feel more comfortable making good policy if they knew some financial offset to their work locally was coming from the commerce that they would be allowing. They don't have to front load all of this expense on applicants. I'm an applicant who went through the toughest framework in Portland. It was brutally expensive. The license fee was high, even though I was a medical retail storefront. But our licensing framework there was very similar to the adult use framework. And I can say that a lot of that was because the city felt like they couldn't get a handle on what would happen. And so they had to get this money here and get this money here and make you provide a performance guarantee here. And a lot of that is out of insecurity of what the costs are going to be of managing the program. I'd also say that I've heard from people within Portland's municipal government that a lot of the fees that they collected ended up going into other services and not actually meeting the costs of the marijuana program, because like most municipalities in Maine, they're under an enormous amount of strain right now due to declines in business from the coronavirus pandemic. So again, I think that's another piece that just needs to be considered, is that this is sort of the landscape we're dealing with. It's a black hole in many cities' finances, and to some extent, this is a decision from the state to help support during a difficult time. And I want to speak real quickly to the idea about the difference between alcohol stores and retail stores and what have you. With all due respect to that point, we're not in the post-prohibition era and haven't been for 90 years. The issues that are facing munis are vastly different. Municipal and public attitudes towards alcohol and cannabis are also vastly different. And why that is relevant is that since alcohol, though it's far more damaging and culturally toxic substance than cannabis, people think cannabis is more dangerous, and therefore the state has created a ridiculous set of totally, over-regulating rules and the law. And so there's probably 100 more pages of rules that we all have to dance around than there are for regulating a cannabis business. So it does stand to reason that more attorneys, more professionals have to spend more time trying to figure these things out. That's not necessarily the fault of cannabis. That's by and large the fault of the state. But that puts the municipalities in this position. And I just wanted to say that is where I think the most significant costs will come into play. I do think on the question of the black market, well, this issue could help for sure, because you are talking about if you have more opt-in, you have more access. Prices in the adult use market are actually a much bigger problem, not necessarily access. So there's always going to be somewhat of a balance there. And a lot of the issues with addressing the black market really should be routed through reducing the state's kind of ridiculous framework for licensing adult use businesses so that it is cheaper for them to provide the product. I think a lot of people covered the access question. And I think that is a huge one, is that, you are going to have people spread out all over the state with little islands of access, and that's a negative for Maine citizens. And that should be something to take into consideration. So I would hope that you would consider voting off to pass on LD 830, and also to some extent, the more limited 870 or 871, I forget. I have to admit that this one seems like a no-brainer. if we're talking about sound and fair tax policy, particularly for commerce that's taking place within the state. So we do think this ought to pass. Moving from excise to sales is a more transparent system of taxation. Businesses that have to deal with customers in these really high prices in the adult use market, it takes some of the pressure off of them. You also heard from Representative Perry about the working capital issue for smaller participants, both on the cultivating side and on the retail side. And in some cases, that creates an opportunity for a distributor who has a huge amount of pool of capital to come in and really take advantage of both players in that situation. And it's a lot of leverage that they're given, which, even though this isn't the committee it will come up in front of, is another reason we should never have marijuana distribution licenses, but separate issue. I just want to make sure, and I'm sorry I'm jumping around a little bit, but that when we do it, if we do anything with the excise tax, one thing we do not do is make a carve out for vertically integrated companies, because that shields only the most wealthy players and reduces, the state's tax take much more so than any other tax tweak would improve them. So do not make a carve out for vertical integration. That is a handout to the most giant players. I wanted to comment real quickly on the fact that the excise tax is set at a nominal level, which, all sales tax and consumption taxes are by nature regressive, but excise taxes at nominal level are very regressive, because all types of goods, from luxury to the lowest common denominator, have to pay the same rate. So excise taxes like that affect lower income people. They bear the tax to the same extent that a luxury buyer would. So I would also recommend, whatever you do with an excise tax, that you not set it at a nominal rate. That's just poor tax policy, unless you want to look forward to revisiting this in a year when wholesale prices are totally different. And, even I think there was an earlier comment about how different we are today than we were when the MLI was trying to come up with a targeted rate. Earlier speakers addressed other reasons why excise taxes are problematic in a mostly tourist-serving industry. We have a tax burden that we don't need to be bearing as citizens. We could have more of that on the tourists who are purchasing in the state. It's a strong argument, I think, a very strong one for making the move suggested in LD 830 that we kind of all, I think, would be on the same page there. As a caveat, there was a big counterpoint brought up, and I'm really glad whoever asked this question, about interstate commerce, because if interstate commerce were to happen, I think it needs to be in statute that we automatically re-implement an excise tax to deal with the issue of wholesalers not having to owe any taxes to the state, should they be selling to Oregon or should they be selling to what have you. Because giant industrial warehouse grows, which we're seeing show up in the state, primarily in the adult use market, who have enormous resources to bear and can put a ton of pressure on the legal system, a ton of pressure on the policy system, they're going to lobby incredibly hard against introducing a tax like that. So they will ultimately end up in that situation with no tax bills to the state at all. And those are going to be primarily giant out-of-state, often domiciled outside of this country, companies who can exert that pressure. So we have to make sure that we take care of our state by having a safety valve in case of interstate, or even, not necessarily federally, but a regional agreement between different states. I think we want to make sure that there's going to be an excise tax on interstate wholesale, even if we've removed it from in-state wholesale. And I don't think that that's too terribly complicated. But I do support 830. We think that ought to pass. If you do not move 830 forward, then 870 becomes, again, I think kind of a no-brainer to pass that, because of the reasons that were highlighted earlier. It's just an extraordinarily unreasonable tax rate that's simply the product of not quite understanding the path of production for certain types of cannabis. So wholeheartedly support that bill, but I would simply like to see 830 pass and render that point moot for the time being. I'd be happy to take any questions, and thanks for your time.
We have a question from Representative Terry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I do have just one question. Going back to earlier in your testimony, you had mentioned the cost of licensing your business in Portland. The last time I bought a liquor license in Portland when I had my restaurant there was 20 something years ago, and it was about $1,500. I think it's similar now. Can you tell me what your licensing fees are right now in the city?
Yep, adult use retail is $10,000. Medical retail is 5,000. The cultivation licenses, there are different, levels, and testing licenses. I don't remember the exact ones because I didn't obsess about them so much.
That's okay.
However, the city isn't just hitting you with that cost. There's another piece that they have, which I don't know that I've seen other towns in Maine use, but which other cities in other states have used, which is something called a performance guarantee, where they require you to hold a sum of cash to make sure that you can run your business, A, somehow, B, so that you can recover any costs associated with dissolution. So while your question was about the licensing fee, actually Portland's taking quite a bit of capital in from and out of the hands of businesses using that vehicle as well. A cultivation facility of 10,000 square feet, which is pretty common, pretty cookie cutter for the adult use market, has a $100,000 performance guarantee that they also have to reserve in cash that can't go anywhere, can't be used, and whose resulting treatment at the end of someone's license isn't even clear. So, that kind of ties into the working capital issue of the excise tax and all these different pieces tying up all this money for small operators. So sorry for my long-winded answer to your short question.
That's okay. Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. Julie, maybe for the work session, would you mind doing a little research and seeing if there are any other businesses that require that performance guarantee? I think that we maybe just passed a bill last year about the oil producers, oil tank holders, at least in South Portland, is coming to mind, that has a bill or that had a something to do with that, but not in a retail, not any kind of retail operation. So I'm interested to see if there's more of those ordinances around. So thank you for your testimony, and
you're welcome.
To my question, Mr. Barnett.
Any additional questions from members of the committee? I just wanted to ask you, Mr. Barnett, so you're talking about Portland having a licensing fee of $10,000, and we've heard some other cities or towns have a fee of $500, and I guess that they're probably all over the map across the state, but do you think this is an effort for municipalities to try to recoup money toward what their costs are to make this work in the municipality? And if we did pass one of these revenue sharing bills, that maybe municipalities wouldn't have such high licensing fees, and because that really takes money out of the pockets of the businesses that are trying to get started, whereas these revenue sharing bills would come off the sales tax that the consumer pays, not out of the pocket of the business that's trying to get started. So I mean, do you think that more businesses could start and that more municipalities wouldn't charge such high fees if they got some of the sales tax revenue?
I 100% agree with that line of thinking. And having done the business planning inside my own organization, now $500, which I know it sounds like some towns do, you're not really in the territory of, sure, it's higher than the $250 for your restaurant license, but you're not really in a territory of like a smash and grab. $10,000 for a company that is facing an enormous set of regulatory hurdles that we actually paid, by the way, in Portland. We paid all this back in August. I was the first person in Portland to open one of the new licensed stores, and I opened that in mid-March. So it's also this huge lag. But anyway, to the core of the question, absolutely. Because they are looking out, they're going, we don't know. Again, they're looking at this huge set of regulations that the state has dropped into this program that they have to themselves micromanage vis-a-vis their ordinance and how they're going to use their people, their inspectors, et cetera. And so they're just looking for any money they can get out of these people, and they're treating them like cash piñatas in some cases. Now, Portland may be the extreme example of doing that, and it sounds to me like they are. But again, they've also set the tone. I think other cities have followed suit with similarly high, or at least proposed similarly high fees. And to your you make a really good point, which again, this all ties into business formation, access, equity within the industry. Front loading costs privileges the rich. It privileges somebody who can afford to just spit out 10 grand or 100 grand in the case of Portland, just to hang out and wait and see what happens. Whereas the other system ultimately privileges just whoever is the better business, because it lets them compete on a more equal footing. Capital isn't quite such a barrier. And I say this is especially important in the marijuana industry because there are so many other kind of pointless or badly thought out or really draconian sort of drug war policy rules that already sap so much money from a small business that's trying to start up. And again, this isn't the committee for that conversation, but we're talking about issues that touch on that. And so I think if we had a system where once you got up and running, you were paying the state and the city, right? And that's how it works for the state, but you're also paying the city once you're up and running, rather than front loading all of these costs. That makes a lot of sense. And I also would add one last thing on that point, which is that the cities who are dropping these really large licensing fees are actually also at risk of litigation, because if they aren't very clearly tying the costs of those fees to the expenses that they have used within their own, they're actually probably in violation of Maine law. So you kind of avoid that piece too. And I expect that, we all say, oh, that won't happen. Sorry. So that's my take on that one.
Okay.
Thank you for the question.
We have a question from Representative Bickford and a question from Representative Perry. Go ahead, Representative Bickford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning still. You touched on something right at the end that I was going to ask you about, and that is municipalities have to justify their licensing fees. They have to tie it into exactly what it costs them. Has anyone challenged a municipality like Portland with exorbitant fees of $10,000, which I can imagine that this could be quite a challenge from one or more retail marijuana facilities?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. And that's a question that I was asking throughout the whole process, both of myself and of my peers, is is there a point where we pull the trigger and challenge this just because the possibility of it going away is worth more than the expense that we, to see if we could? I think the answer is yes. I think there will be challenges to these. I don't know that there are any existing, so I think that might have been your question. But the very nature of them doing it that way opens them up to that, which, whether you like the revenue sharing, piece or not, that I think at least avoids that legal quandary for getting the city compensated for what it's doing within its jurisdiction. But yeah, I think that is a ripe area for legislation, for litigation, not legislation. It's a ripe area for litigation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good question for Representative Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony. It's been fantastic. And this question isn't directly related to the bills in front of us, but I think it fits into the piece about the extra challenges you face as a marijuana retailer. And something I learned that was so unbelievable to me, I want to ask you here in front of the committee so we can all hear it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the information I was given, that in a normal business, if you did $1 million in sales, your cost of goods, let's say, was $500,000, your cost of labor was a couple $100,000, your cost of all other expenses a couple $100,000, you'd have $100,000 of taxable income that you'd pay your state and federal taxes on. Is my understanding correct that you have to pay state and federal taxes on the entire $1 million, every penny that comes through your door, that you don't get to count any of your expenses?
So you have hit on the giant cluster bomb in the middle of IRS tax code called 280E. And yes, you are correct, with one slight exception, which is that at the very least, marijuana firms are able to deduct their costs of goods sold. So that's all. And the reason that that's still relevant is because in your example that you gave, we were paying now state and local taxes on 500,000 instead of 100,000. And to give you an even worse example, which, you know, just to take this even further for the members of the committee, let's say you lost money for the year because you had the lawsuit, you had an issue with the building, you had maintenance expenses, your personnel costs, you had turnover, you had all this and that occurred below the costs of goods sold, which is just like, hey, I bought this package to sell it. That's your cost of goods sold. And you can do your best to wrap transportation costs into that as well. But there's very little that you can shove into the cost of goods sold line. And US tax court has been very aggressive in disallowing those. So yeah, we're super pinioned underneath that, but you could actually lose 200,000.
Hey, Mrs. Holyoke, how are you?
Oh.
Good, I'm glad to hear that. This is Kevin from the Hydro.
Go ahead.
Anyway, just to finish my point, which it was that, you know, you could lose $200,000, and if your cost of goods sold, you know, your revenue less your cost of goods sold is still 500,000, you still owe taxes on 500,000, even if your business had a horrible year.
Amazing. I just thought that was an
Eye popper, isn't it?
important thing to get out here publicly. That's unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's great. Thank you for asking that question, particularly in this committee, since I assure you it will come up again. Thank you for the question.
And any additional questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Barnett. Good to see you. Appreciate you being
Thank you.
here.
Good to see you as well.
We'll now hear from Joseph Ferris to speak in support, followed by Michelle Daniels. Is Joseph Ferris with us? Is Joseph Ferris with us? He's in the, you see his name, but can he hear us? Welcome to the committee. You're up next to speak in support.
There we go.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm a member of the Borough City Council, 19 years. We are looking at going with opting into medical marijuana. Kevin O'Connell sponsored CD 740. We support that. We would probably support some of the other bills. Our goal was to help through sharing revenues with the state on medical marijuana, that we would not medical marijuana, adult marijuana, that we would generate some revenues to help with the tax base. It doesn't sound like that's what I'm hearing today, that that's a likely scenario. But we would, we haven't opted in yet. We're in the process of drafting. I'm not sure where we would stand if there was no revenue sharing bill of any sort. I'm not sure we would do it. Our mayor is here, Michelle Daniels, and I'll let her continue with this. That's all I have.
Great. Are there any questions from members of the committee for Mr. Ferris? Seeing none, thank you for being with us today. We'll now hear from Michelle Daniels to speak in support, and following her testimony, we'll hear from Molina Dumas. Is Michelle Daniels with us?
Hi, sorry, my internet is going in and out here. Am I getting through to everyone?
You are.
Great, thank you. As Joe said, my name is Michelle LeBrie Daniels and I'm the mayor of Brewer. We have not opted in yet. We are in the process of research. I now know more about marijuana than I ever thought I would. Basically, we're here today to support Representative O'Connell's legislation of the LD 740. and also recognize that there are many similar proposals out there that you are considering at this time. I'm not here to discuss percentages or the financial aspects of LD 40 or the other legislation, but to bring forth the added roles of the municipal government as recreational marijuana use is established and is expanded. According to leafly.com, and to reiterate Representative Roberts, Maine is one of the few states that does not allow local municipalities to receive or enact local recreational marijuana sales. So what I ask is that as we go forward, as Representative Perry said, when you're in the municipal side of it, looking at all of the things that we have for costs coming up, we're trying to make the decisions that are right for our city, not bring that cost back to the taxpayers of our city, and be able to new businesses be created and not have that financial burden come back on the city to do that. So if we could look at these bills and help us out, appreciate it, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there any questions from members of the committee? Yes, Representative Perry.
Thank you. I just want to thank my old high school pal for being here to testify today and congratulate her for being the new mayor of Bangor, Brewer.
Thank you.
Much younger high school friend.
Yes, yes.
Not sure how the math works on that, but thank you for that, Representative Perry. Any further questions, members of the committee? Representative Terry.
I do have a quick question. Yes, thank you. And we heard that Representative Perry's nickname in high school was very lovely.
He was the sweetest boy in high school. He really was. He was the one that looked out for everybody. He was the one that drove everybody home if need be. He, you know.
Good guy, and good that he's looking out for the city of Brewer and the city of Bangor. I just have one quick question for you, Ms. Daniels, if you don't mind.
Sure.
We heard that Portland is charging quite a high dollar amount for licensing in the city. When you, if you do decide to opt into this, will you be considering very high licensing in order to help cut those costs at this point?
That is one of the considerations we are looking at this point. We're in the process of figuring this all out. I'm not only looking at the state of Maine, but other states to how they have set things up. We're looking at breaking down what the costs actually are for us. Things come up, as you know, that we haven't been thought of. We have cooperative grows within the city. How do you detect smells? We're looking at if we're going to have to send people away to train their noses to be able to smell for excessive smells coming out of the buildings. We can smell it, but is it over the certain amount? You know, this is a huge amount of cost. So things like this that are keep adding up. If there isn't funds coming back to the city for that, yes, it's all going to have to be built into the initial startup.
Great, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Any additional questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony, Ms. Daniels.
Thank you.
We will now hear from Melina Dumas, who is here to speak in support of LD 830 and 871.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Taxation. My name is Melina Dumas. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Drummond Woodsum in Portland, Maine. I'm here today on behalf of Maine Organic Therapy Remedy Compassion Center, which are 2 of the 8 registered dispensaries in Maine, as well as Curaleaf Maine, which has several pending adult use marijuana establishment licenses. As noted, I'm testifying in support of LD 830 and in support of LD 871 as an alternative if the committee is not in favor of repealing the marijuana excise tax. We strongly support LD 830, which would repeal the excise tax on adult use marijuana and increase the sales tax from 10 to 20% in January 2022. And I really appreciate the discussion so far and all the thoughtful questions that the tax committee has already asked. And I'll probably be reiterating some of the points you've already heard. Importantly, this change should not require a fiscal note. The result of the bill passing would be a simplification of the tax return filing process for marijuana businesses. This will result in streamlined mechanisms for compliance and enforcement as well. The tax imposed on the customer and the tax revenues that were intended to go to the state under the initial legislation would really remain the same. The positive impact on adult use marijuana businesses, however, would be significant. The intent all along was to have an effective tax rate of 20% borne by the customer, and the new model will still achieve that goal while simplifying the process of getting those tax revenues to the state. The marijuana excise tax amounts that are currently in statute were calculated based on an estimate of the price of marijuana per pound in order to achieve approximately a 10% excise tax on marijuana sold from marijuana cultivation facilities. The expectation was that 10% would then be passed on to the customer, along with the 10% tax at the point of sale, which is how you get the 20% effective tax rate. For some additional context that I don't think has been discussed already, at the time of the prior discussions around adult use marijuana taxation, there was initial pushback on a sales tax higher than 10% because of a prediction that this would dissuade the potential customer base from accessing the adult use market. But now that you've heard that adult use stores have been open for several months now, it doesn't seem like the initially very high prices were an issue. It sounds like they're also decreasing now. But it seems like customers will be willing to pay prices and wouldn't be put off by a higher sales tax on a lower initial price. A 20% sales tax on the customer remains among the lowest effective tax rates in the country. I know there was a question about that for states that have legalized adult use marijuana. Repealing the excise tax will likely reduce some overhead costs for adult use marijuana cultivation facilities as well. So as you know, I think it's very clear from any conversation we have on marijuana businesses are subject to a myriad of complex laws and regulations. I'm acutely aware of this because I spend 100% of my time during my workday every day focusing on licensing and regulatory compliance for cannabis businesses in Maine. Removing the requirement to file for an additional tax registration and file tax returns by mail each month, because electronic tax returns are actually not accepted for marijuana excise tax, unlike for sales tax returns, which are easier to file. It might not seem like much, but it would be a big help given the numerous state registrations that marijuana businesses are already required to hold and renew regularly. It would also eliminate the complicated process of calculating the excise tax and entering that information into the tracking system. Ensuring tax compliance is an integral part of the licensing and renewal process in the adult use marijuana program. So simplifying and streamlining this process will mitigate the risk of inadvertent errors that could jeopardize a license and make sure that these tax revenues continue to get to the state. So turning to LD 871, as you heard, the Office of Marijuana Policy engaged in emergency rulemaking last year to allow licensees to calculate a reduction of the weight of wet or frozen marijuana prior to determining the required excise tax payment. So this bill addresses unintended consequences of the initial calculation of excise tax payments written into the statute. And this is really important because it would not be economically feasible for those businesses to transition from medical to adult use cultivation facilities without these accommodations. While the enactment of the new rule last year allowed the adult use market to launch, it's really important to incorporate this technical fix directly into the tax statute as well if you decide not to repeal the marijuana excise tax. So I'm going to skip over some of this because I think you've already heard about the calculation of the $335 per pound for flower and $94 per pound for trim, and kind of the context around this bill in particular. But I did want to talk about another tax issue that severely burdens adult use marijuana establishments in the same way as these other topics that we've discussed, and that Representative Perry actually astutely brought up in his conversation with Mr. Barnett, and that's Section 280E of the Internal Revenue Code. And I actually included a proposed amendment in my my written testimony in support of LD 830 that expands the current exemption from state law for Section 280E that's currently authorized for registered caregivers and dispensaries to incorporate that as well for medical marijuana manufacturing facilities, testing facilities, and all adult use marijuana establishments. So that testimony is kind of fleshed out more in my written comments with the proposed amendment. And I'm also happy to provide any additional information prior to the work session if it'd be helpful, or answer questions if I can today.
Great.
And oh, sorry, I have a couple more seconds. I had one more comment I was hoping to make.
Go ahead.
It occurred to me to sort of mention a comment previously about vertically integrated businesses, because I know that when I first started working in this field, I didn't know what that term meant. So, and possibly everyone in the committee is really aware of what vertically integrated businesses are, but just for the sake of clarification, a vertically integrated business is one that cultivates, manufactures, and sells product directly to their client base. So if you look at the medical marijuana program, all registered caregivers or many registered caregivers are vertically integrated businesses because they cultivate their own marijuana, manufacture edible marijuana products from the marijuana they cultivate, and then sell to patients. And that's similar in the adult use program as well. There are some standalone adult use marijuana cultivation facilities, but a lot of the businesses in our state are vertically integrated because that's kind of the most cost-effective way to run these operations. So I don't think a carve out for certain types of businesses would likely make sense in this context. And just wanted to address because I think that was brought up. That's all. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for your testimony. We have a question from Representative Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony. You mentioned one of your clients is Curaleaf, and they're one of the stores that we have here in Bangor. Did you also say that they have several pending applications for more stores in Maine?
Yes, Curaleaf Adult Use Maine, I think is the name of the company, has several, and this is all information that's publicly accessible on OMP's website. They have several pending. They have conditional licenses, are in the process of getting adult use marijuana store, but also cultivation facility and manufacturing facility licenses. The number of stores in adult use is limited to 4. You can only have an ownership interest in 4 adult use marijuana stores, but they have other license applications in for cultivation and manufacturing as well.
So a little bit of a follow up on that. So I think that would indicate that revenues are going to be going up exponentially. And if we're going to make a change, we got to do it at the ground level, or we'll never make these changes down the road. Now, as far as the other levels of activity like cultivation, would the tax scheme be the same, that your inputs would be exempt, but all your other costs would remain taxable?
All right, so sorry, you're talking about 280, right? So it's so instead of it just being cost of goods sold, it's any business expenses. So, and that's actually, it's a much bigger problem, I think, for retail outlets than it is for cultivation and manufacturing. But it's important to, I think it's important to treat all marijuana businesses in the state the same for the purpose of those exemptions. And I think that's as far as we're able to go, given the restrictions under federal law.
I was just wondering if it is vertically integrated, if there was an opportunity, or if people were using that opportunity to bury costs into the manufacturing side and to have smaller margin to the retail side.
I could get some more information for you on that for the work session possibly. I mean, there's definitely ways that businesses work with their accountant and attorneys to structure their operations to mitigate the impacts where possible. There's sort of limited ways to do that, but one way is sort of separating the cultivation and manufacturing from retail when you're applying for licenses and that type of thing with the entities that have the tax liability. But if it's helpful, I can provide some more specific information about 280E for the work session, if that's something you're considering addressing.
We have a question from Representative Krajicek.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony. I just have a concern about the constitutionality of trying to give sales tax to just the municipalities that are licensing these stores. It was my belief from, bills that we had last year and everything, that it would have to go to every municipality. So it would have to go into the general fund and then be used as revenue sharing, as opposed to saying, okay, Portland has so many stores and they're selling so much of this marijuana, so they get a share of the sales tax just from what was sold in Portland, as opposed to a town that decided not to have any stores and they're not going to get any of that revenue sharing. So I guess I just have a concern about whether any of these policies, except for the excise tax one, any of these bills, I'm sorry, would be constitution, against the Constitution. And I would think that would be better if we just put the marijuana money into the general fund and get to the revenue sharing at the level that it should be. And then the towns that are doing this would be able to be reimbursed for the expense that they're having to license these places. Thank you.
Can you comment on that? Do you know about the constitutionality of this?
Yeah, so my testimony today was just in terms of the excise tax repeal or clarification. So we were neither for nor against the revenue sharing aspect. So I think it's a very good question, but it's not something that as an attorney I've done the legal analysis on that I could answer that question for you today.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any additional questions from members of the committee? And go ahead, Representative Terry.
Sorry, I was just going to ask Julie if she could get that information for us about the constitutionality of this for our work session.
So on
I'll
the
see what I can do.
Thank
you. On the sharing a portion of the sales tax money with the host cities and towns. Those bills. Okay, and Ms. Dumas, you're also signed up to speak neither for nor against. Do you still want to do that on those other bills, or?
No, yeah. So after hearing the conversation today, I don't think I have comment on it. I just kind of wanted to hear what people were thinking. But yeah, we don't have a strong position on any of those bills. But of course, if the excise tax were addressed, then probably that would be taken into consideration in conjunction with some of those other bills that incorporate excise tax revenues, of course.
I just didn't know whether to call on you again to speak either.
No, thank you. I appreciate that very much. Yeah, I'm all set for today, I think.
So thank you for testifying today. We appreciate your testimony. We do also have Dan Walker, who apparently is in our waiting room, that had signed up to speak, but after the list of those who had signed up had already been generated. So maybe we can bring him in now and have him speak in support of LD 830.
I just promoted him. He should be here any second.
Welcome, Mr. Walker. For those who don't know him, he's a foremost expert in this area of policy going back to, I believe, after the 2009 referendum on medical marijuana dispensaries was passed. So welcome, Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, members of the tax committee. Yeah, my name is Dan Walker. I've been involved in this area for over a decade now. I'm with Pretty Flaherty, and I've formed our cannabis practice group that we have here. And I testified today on behalf of the Wellness Connection of Maine. Wellness Connection operates a retail store in South Portland, 3 dispensaries in the medical marijuana program, which include retail operations in Portland, Gardner, and Brewer, and a cultivation and processing facility in Auburn, and also a commercial kitchen at the Gardner facility. I'm here today to testify really in support of LD 830, and then also 871 if 830 does not pass. And we're also generally supportive of the municipal revenue sharing, but I'm not going to get into that today, but generally supportive of those issues. So there, as you've heard, there was an early debate during the Marijuana Legalization Implementation Committee around which way to go. Should it be an excise tax? Should it be a sales tax? Should it be a combination of the two? And obviously, and I think early on the decision was moving to a 20% sales tax, but then ultimately the excise going to half and half prevailed. What we've seen going forward is that, or in the adult use marketplace right now, is that moving to a straight sales tax would tremendously simplify the process, especially with wholesale transactions. So what you'll see is that, as we've heard, the price of cannabis, as more and more entities get licensed in the adult use program, the price of cannabis is coming down, and with an excise tax that's fixed, there's going to be trouble keeping up with this amount. So if the excise tax is too high as a percentage of the overall transaction, this is going to become more and more problematic. And as a result, it's going to kind of push the price back up again. And the concern is that it could encourage, once again, black market purchasing, because there's going to be such a difference between the prices. So we think the best way to kind of get at the right price is to move this entirely into a sales tax that can fluctuate with the sale. And I think I heard another great point around the fact that this will also allow for more exporting of the tax, which I think has always been a goal of Maine's tax program. I wasn't expecting to testify also on 280E, but I think I would support Ms. Dumas's amendment to that. I think that's tremendously supportive. There was an amendment, several years ago, there was a bill several years ago that allowed 280E to non-conform federally with 280E for the medical program, but it seems appropriate to expand that to, and I'm not sure which bill you put it on, but to expand that to the adult use program, manufacturing, medical manufacturing, and testing. I think that's all. I think that those are all my comments. So.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Walker. Any questions from members of the committee for Mr. Walker? So just as when you, just before you spoke, had said that you'd been involved for a long time, and you mentioned that as well, going back over a decade. I mean, as you've seen this market evolve and the recreational market become legal and develop over the last, 3 or 4 years since that passed, do you think with the number of licenses being issued and pending and towns that have chose to opt in across the state, do you see a lot more growth happening, or do you think that we're kind of not going to see a lot more growth? I mean, do you think that the lack of a sharing of revenue with cities and towns is deterring some cities and towns from opting in? And if we did pass one of those bills, would more towns opt in, or are we kind of hitting like a ceiling of the number of stores and really isn't going to be?
No, I don't think you're seeing a ceiling. I mean, I think there's going to be tremendous growth. And I think seeing the city of Brewer appear today, I think was very kind of symptomatic. I mean, they're deciding which way to go right now, and I think that would help them. And I think there's other communities like that. I do also think, honestly, that as folks see the tremendous growth, and I think this will be the first tourist season this summer where adult use stores are starting to get open. I think that people are going to see how quickly the adult use market catches on. If it hasn't caught, we've already seen growth after growth. There's a steady rise, and then once the summer hits, it's going to be much bigger. And I think communities will start looking at, there's empty retail space around right now, and I think people are going to start looking to fill that space. But I certainly think that this could help.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm just wondering, it's a policy question for us, if we want to see as many towns as possible opt in, as much revenue as possible come into the state. Do you think that allowing the sharing of some of the revenue with the cities and towns that choose to opt in is a good way to do that? Or do you think that the towns that opt in would do it anyway, and there really wouldn't be additional towns that would opt in a significant way if we shared any of the revenue versus if we didn't?
No, I think there will be more towns that opt in if given that. And we've, I think other folks will say we've sat through a number of municipal meetings of this issue around the state, and we hear the way folks talk about it. And I think it would be an effective incentive for more towns to move into this. You hear it in the discussions that they're having.
Mm-hmm. And if we didn't pass any of these, do you think there'd be towns that don't opt in, and there'd be this issue where the black market continues to thrive, and maybe some of the more rural areas where the towns don't want to opt in, and so someone's either drives to Portland, 30 or 40 miles, or they continue to support the black market, in their town. If the town doesn't opt in, do you think that's a real concern that we should be thinking about, or not so much?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, but I think it'll slightly slow the growth. I mean, we still live in a state where we have towns that haven't opted into selling, alcohol. And so, those people drive to the next town, but I think it's just the state we live in. And I think allowing folks to have that opportunity from a municipal perspective to participate, I think will increase the growth. I mean, will increase the acceleration.
Yeah. I think the difference with this is there isn't like a thriving underground alcohol market like there already is with marijuana, or has been up to this point, this sort of black market that's existed for decades or whatever. So,
but I think there was.
Well, there was before Prohibition, but I mean, like today as we speak, there isn't like a thriving underground, at least as far as I'm aware of, alcohol market.
Right. Correct.
So, I mean, yes, there's towns that aren't opting in, but people aren't buying alcohol from some guy that's, making moonshine down the road from them or something versus driving to a town that has alcohol for sale, whereas that is what's going on with marijuana. I mean, there's people probably in every town in the state that are in the black market or were in the black market. And so we're trying to squash that with this legal recreational market. And by not sharing any of the revenue, if towns are saying no, and there's towns within a cluster of an area that say no, then that black market continues to thrive, I think, in those areas. And that's what I think a big policy question that we should be thinking about with the sharing of revenue bills.
Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah. But we have a question from Representative Sachs.
Hello, Mr. Walker. Thanks for being here today.
Representative Sachs.
There had been a question previously about licensure, and with your long history here, we had heard from one bit of testimony that the licensure fees that, for example, Portland's been able to garner actually have gone to other things. So it's a stream of revenue that even with this revenue sharing, I have a question in my mind whether they would lower license fees because it's very hard for municipalities to give up revenue once established. Do you have any comments or thoughts about that?
About the level of the licensing fees?
Correct. And whether the revenue sharing portion of this would lead to lower licensing fees, or those that have already established it would continue to retain that revenue stream in addition to this revenue sharing, or would there be any impact at all?
I think the licensing fees would over time go down. Look at the state fees in the medical program. The medical program, it started out, it felt like it needed the funds, but the medical program's got plenty of funds. And so the fees in the medical program for caregivers and for dispensaries have ratcheted down in some cases. So I think as communities understand that they do have these funds, I think it will allow for reduction in those fees.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Any additional questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being with us, Mr. Walker. Great to have you here today. We don't have anybody else signed up to speak, and I don't know if you're aware of anybody else, Avery, in the waiting room that wants to speak, but it doesn't seem like we have anybody else today.
We have one person raising their hand.
You do? Okay. Maybe we can allow them in and let
Yeah.
them speak. Are they, you can promote them now. Is that Joel Pepin? Welcome, Mr. Pepin. You're here to speak in support of any or all of these bills?
Yes, hi, hello. Thank you for having me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair and distinguished members of the Taxation Committee. My name is Joel Pepin, speaking on behalf of the Maine Cannabis Industry Association. We've been working closely with Main Street Solutions and Mike Saxel for the past few years on cannabis policy. Also speaking to you on behalf of an industry operator, both medically and adult use, working as a caregiver, cultivating caregiver with a retail storefront, and as an adult use cultivator and adult use and medical manufacturer. Speaking in support of LD 1185, Mr. Chair, to your last points, I do believe if there were more revenue sharing, I've sat into a number of city town meetings over the years, and taxation and what is in it for the town from a financial perspective has been a major topic. So I do believe that I agree with Dan, Mr. Walker, there would be a greater acceleration in the growth of the industry should there be towns that have an economic incentive to opt in. From a code standpoint, there's a lot of work, from everything from code officers to city clerks processing these applications. Speaking on behalf of town of Windham, where I operate a medical retail store, from a policing standpoint, publicly during some of the Windham Town Hall meetings, the chief of police in Windham has said that they haven't seen an increased burden on the police force with specifically medical retail storefronts, and there's 9 in the town of Windham, I believe, currently operating. But there is a lot that the towns have to sort of educate themselves on and then process once they have opted in. So I believe it would help the market grow. I think it would create more jobs in this industry, in an industry right now that's probably hiring more people than any other industry in the state of Maine. And most importantly, I think it would, over time, significantly sort of tamp down the black market should there be more towns that opt in. One other reason I support LD 185, it doesn't add any cost to operators, or it won't pass costs down to the consumer, most importantly. So this is just sort of, from what I understand, a piece of the of revenue that the state's collecting going back to the municipalities in proportion from the revenue generated in their towns. Also speaking in support of LD 830, the excise tax, and should that not pass, LD 871, the wet weight conversion, the excise tax, back to 830. One thing that's important to note is, as a cultivator, if you grow, let's say, 100 pounds of adult use flower, you pay the excise tax when that leaves the facility, not when it's simply done and sitting in your vault at the cultivation. So one complication is, should you be a cultivator who wants to outsource your packaging, a manufacturing licensee can package for an adult use cultivator. However, you would have to pay the excise tax as that transfer occurs, just to simply have your product transferred. So for a vertically integrated company like ourselves, we may wish to, because we're limited on space, let's say at the cultivation facility, transfer finished flower to a manufacturing license to package there, where we would then store it and vault it and inventory the product. However, you'd have to tie up tens of thousands of dollars just to do that, which from a cash standpoint is burdensome. Also, for us, for instance, I mean, we're a bootstrap company and, come from the medical industry, started over 10 years ago. The excise tax, as they started coming in, we started as an adult use cultivation company back in October. And so what prompted me, and I've been in charge of my company paying the state excise tax, is the mail that physically comes in and reminds you to make that payment. And there was some glitch where the mail hadn't come in, and for one reason or another, I was late beyond the 15th for a month paying the tax, even though we had all the money to do so. And we were assessed a penalty that was significant. It was 10% of the cost of the amount owed. So being late for a couple of days, and there was nothing the Maine Revenue Services could do to abate it, but we ended up having to pay over $3,000 just because there was some glitch in the mail coming in. I've since sort of streamlined that process, and I've got internal prompts on my calendar so it doesn't happen again. But it was an expensive mistake that Maine Revenue didn't seem to have any leeway on. Also, if you want to take finished flower, let's say you've got a good inventory of finished flower, you want to make some concentrates with that. Paying the excise tax based on flower, it discourages you from making other concentrates from that. Then lastly, on LD 871, to echo some of the other comments, it was an oversight simply, even on the medical side. When we passed LD 738, I believe in 2017, fresh frozen processing has been something that sort of emerged over the past couple of years. And when we were in MLI committee talking about a lot of this adult use excise tax, it wasn't something that was as common as it is nowadays. So should 830 not pass, most certainly in support of 871. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you for your testimony. Question from Representative Terry.
Yeah, just sort of a little maybe process question for myself, since you seem to have a good broad base, especially on the wet weight versus dry weight sort of thing. So if you're paying your excise tax on the wet weight as it's harvested, if there's a loss of any sort while it's drying in the drying process, you're just out. It's just finished. You get nothing from it, correct?
The loss would be registered and accounted for in metric, the state seed to sale tracking. But quite honestly, it's discouraged us from fresh freezing any plant material and sending it to extraction. The economics simply aren't there to pay $335 on 80% water weight.
Right. Yeah, I know. In the restaurant business, we tried to stay away from frozen at sea fish for that very same reason. It's just it's a cost that we'll never make up from it. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any additional questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being with us today. Appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
So I don't believe we have anybody else signed up to speak. So we'll now close the public hearings. That'll be 1185, 1195, 740, 830, and 871. That concludes our public hearings for the day. I don't know if you have anything for us, Julie, that we should know about, or Representative Terry, anything you think we should know about?
Just the mantra speak, please go to our website and read all of the written testimony that folks did not get a chance to come and speak publicly to. There's a lot of really good information. I've just perused it so far, and it looks like there's quite a bit of information in there that that could be helpful to our work.
Excellent. Thank you for that reminder. So I guess we are all set for now. So we'll conclude this meeting of the Committee on Taxation, and we'll see everyone tomorrow morning for work session starting at